Good evening. It's a little bit after 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and call the June 19th, 2014 Planning Commission meeting to order. Do a roll call.
Commissioner Essett. Here. Commissioner Gonzalez-Parva. Here. Commissioner Green.
Here.
Commissioner Hamilton. Here. Chair Ketchum.
Here.
Commissioner Lamotte. Here. And Vice Chair Kierline is absent.
Thank you. So the next item is approval of the agenda. Are there any comments, or do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as it stands.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. So we'll proceed with the agenda. First item is public comments on items not on tonight's agenda. So if you have anything on any items that are any issues not on tonight's agenda, you have 3 minutes. Okay, so we'll close the non-agenda item. We'll let Commissioner Kierline get settled. And as we proceed, the next item is the consent items. We have 2 items on the consent calendar. One of them is a continuance, and the other one is 72 Monte Vista.
As a person within 300 feet of the consent items, I will recuse myself from any proceedings with this.
And I just want to clarify that number 1 isn't a continuance.
I'm sorry, it's
we actually
revised.
reviewed it and determined that it didn't require your approval, so we refunded their money.
Thank you. That's a good clarification. So what I would ask, is there anyone in the public that has anything to say about 72 Monte Vista that is not in support of the proposed project? Okay. So is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I second the motion.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
None opposed, but we have 1 recused for the record. Commissioner Green is recused. So now we're on to public hearing items, and we're all back and able to talk. First item on tonight's agenda for public hearing is 1966 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, application 14-2.
Okay, on June 20th of 2013, the Commission approved a use permit for a mixed-use development for the building, which included a bicycle museum in the front portion, wholesale food preparation, and an upstairs apartment in the rear of the building, with the middle commercial space to be used as either office space or retail space or museum event space. The property owner now has a tenant who is already remodeling the rear third of the building to accommodate the wholesale production of vegan cheese. This tenant is applying to modify the original use permit to use the middle third of the building as a combination office, retail sales area, and a demonstration kitchen. The total space proposed for use by the office, retail, demonstration kitchen is 1,530 square feet. The proposed modification of the original use permit. Sure. The proposed modification of the use permit will require the adoption of a new resolution of approval, but it is in keeping with the originally approved mixed use for the property. The parking requirements are met, even with the revised use, and the only proposed exterior changes to the building which require design review are 2 large windows, 3 new skylights, and the east elevation will be painted to help identify the use of the rear of the building by a business separate from the bicycle museum. And we're recommending that you approve the requested modification of the use permit and design review permit by adopting resolution number 14-8, including the original conditions of approval with some requested hours of operation time changes, which I probably should have explained. So I'll do that now. They're requesting to extend the hours a little bit because they would like to have some events in the evening. So they want to expand them to 7 p.m. In the original condition, they were supposed to end at 6, and once a week they would like to remain open till 9 p.m. and once a month remain open until 11 p.m. And staff doesn't have a problem with those extended hours. So that would conclude our report.
Thanks. So are there questions for staff this time?
I just have a clarifying question on the hours of operation. In the staff report, it comments that they want to remain open 2 nights a week
Yes, that's
until
correct.
9 p.m. and 2
Yeah.
nights a month, but in the resolution, it still has the 1.
So we need to change that. They would
Change
like
the
to stay
resolution.
open 2 nights. Thank you for noticing that.
I had a couple of questions for staff. There's a mention in here that a neighbor had requested shipping containers to be removed. And then there was also a lot line adjustment that needed to be recorded. I just wondered if either of those were done or what the status was.
You know, those shipping containers were approved by past design review board members and planning commissioners, and my understanding is that the new business does plan to use those. So we weren't willing to make it a condition that those be removed, but you can ask the applicant maybe to address that further. And the lot line adjustment, we left in the conditions because it will be required if they try to put openings on the north side of the building. And so at one point, there was going to be a requirement for an exit there. Then they would have to move the lot line so that they had a clear exit path. But at this point, there's no openings proposed. So I think we need to leave it in there in case at some point they come in to try to open up that side of the building.
Okay, thank you.
So again, just in summary, the triggers that are triggering the use permit changes are the hours and the design with the windows. The hours and the 3 design elements, the new windows, skylights, and the painting. But the parking, which was part of the report, is fine. That's
The
not part
parking,
of
the
it.
parking still complies.
Okay, so those are the things that are being triggered here.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions over there? Okay. So I'm just trying to, and I kind of lined up what we approved in the past and what's being requested now. So when we had the discussion less than a year ago now, on the resolution 13-6, which is what is currently under, it's being requested to be modified. The discussion we had at that time was a museum, kind of an in-between space that would be used by the museum, possibly for retail, possibly for events, that the times that would be operating was consistent with the museum, so as not to create a different impact on the neighborhood. And then the business, the wholesale commercial kitchen would operate Sunday through Saturday, so 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So what we're talking about now is the commercial kitchen is also going to be changing times.
Clarify this with the applicant, but my understanding is that the wholesale kitchen is probably going to keep the same 8 to 6 hours, but it's the retail space that they're hoping to maybe have events or things where they'd like to stay open till 7. Am I right about that, Morgan? Is he here? He's not listening. Okay.
And we'll ask him, but I think what I'm trying to get at is the fourth bullet that we had in our resolution at that time was if the center commercial space is used for museum events, the event is limited to taking place during the approved museum hours. So we set a constraint to the use of that kind of center space to the museum, which was an implication if the center is used for museum. So what we're talking about is at that time what we were approving was sort of a window of when things would be open, and this is
Right.
expanding it daily by 1 hour. Mm-hmm. And now with the changes, twice per week until 9 and twice per month until 11.
Once per month until 11, correct. That's what they're asking for.
I just wanted to make sure, because I think the request, and it's kind of handwritten in the exhibit, Exhibit B.
Exhibit B does say hours of operation, regular hours not to exceed 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. with 2 nights per week until 9 p.m. and 2 nights monthly until 11.
Right. And it was once per month, and then it's handwritten with a change to twice per week and twice per month. So we're talking about, you have 4 weeks in a month, so that's 8, 10, basically 10 nights of the 30 nights where you're going to have hours way past 7, so either 9 or 11. So
Right.
it's
That's
so-
what they're asking for.
right.
You
And it doesn't say what dates, so it could be any day of the week.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, weekends might be different than weekdays. So I think these are, I just wanted to bring those up because I think as we were discussing it, it was really, yes, it could be, we were trying to create some space and opportunity, but I think we were constraining the hours based upon, in my mind, imagining the museum, but trying to create flexibility, but being clear about the window of operation. And this is, to me, this is a pretty big difference. So I just wanted to point that out. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Good. Oh, good. I think if you recall, the idea of using that space for the museum, if it wasn't leased yet, was actually a friendly amendment from staff to give them flexibility if it wasn't being leased. So we always did envision potentially a higher use or a different use coming back in. And in this case, it's just a matter that that middle space is piggybacked with the back space.
So what you're saying is that we didn't actually talk about times for that middle space. Is that
Except
what I'm
in-
getting at? Is we actually did talk about times for the middle space and limited it to some degree.
If it
for
was
the
being
building.
used for the bike museum.
Right.
But, you can take input, and if you feel those hours need to be modified, you can
Okay.
change the resolution.
So is it possible that the museum might have special events running in their space the same time that these middle spaces are running events?
I'd ask the applicant that. My guess would be yes. Actually might be a nice marriage.
And then one other thing I'm noting, and I think you're right, trying to compare apples to apples on this is, the red line's a little bit different, trying to do that. But if you notice the last bullet point on the original approval said, if the center commercial space is used for museum events, the event is limited to taking place during approved museum hours. The approved museum hours at that time on Thursday every week went till 9 p.m. So they already had the approval to go until 9 p.m. one day a week, and until 7 p.m. on the other days. The new one actually has a reduction of museum hours every Thursday through Monday until 7 p.m. So the 9 p.m. is taken off, but then they're going back and asking twice a week until 9 p.m. So I don't know whether we should be comparing it on a red line basis or looking at it anew, but there's lots of different bullet points here. So I guess we should wait and ask and figure that out.
Yep. No, that is a different change. And I just bringing it up because I recall talking about times of operation and impacts to the neighborhood, and we can I think that's actually a good thing to look back at, is the museum hours. Okay, so if we're good with questions to staff, I'd like to ask the applicant to come up.
I'm Morgan Hall, the architect on the project, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right, so what we were discussing was really around the times of operation. And I think the observation that's been made is that at least what's being proposed now is the museum would be open Thursday through Monday, 11 to 7, which is actually a reduction of some of the hours that we had talked about as opportunities for the museum. The original resolution was on Thursdays and Fridays. Oh, on Thursday night, they would be open till 11 p.m. And on Friday through Wednesday, they could be open till 7 p.m. So the discussion and what I was asking was, if it's 2 nights a week till 9 p.m. and 2 nights a month till 11 p.m., are there set nights? Is this kind of wide open? What's the vision of these later hours?
Well, I think originally when the initial use permit was considered back in May of 2013. The idea was to change the building from a grocery to a mixed-use building, and there was a certain amount of general flexibility that everybody, I think, was trying to build into the whole resolution. And part of that was, well, what if that middle space wasn't leased out and the museum wanted to have a big reception? I believe that clause sort of covered that eventuality. What's happened now is that space has now been leased by a completely separate entity from the bicycle museum people, and they've requested these hours. The regular functioning of the kitchen, the wholesale kitchen, will be pretty much the state hours. It's just, and for that matter, the offices in the rear will be pretty much regular. It's just they don't really know exactly when the demonstration or exhibition kitchen would be used, and that would be typically for Miyoko to give cooking demonstrations, and that might very well be in the evening, more likely to be in the evening. So given that there's no class schedule or demonstration schedule worked out at this point, we just wanted to get as much flexibility in that schedule at this point. And the possibility of when to schedule these things, that is to say, if we just said it'd be one night a week or one night a month, we could be held to that. And the thought was, if we made it 2, that would give us more latitude. If it's a sticking point, it's not really that important. We just know that if it's limited and etched in stone, that'll limit the possibility of these demonstrations.
So just kind of to follow up on that, is there a kind of an idea of how many people we would be talking about? Is this,
well,
10, 15 people, or is this 40 or 50 people?
The area, the seating area in front of the sort of the demonstration kitchen there is about, I think, 16 seats. It's not a big, huge gathering. It's just a small. You can think about it like a cooking class or something. So it's not a huge group of people.
So that could be a different way of sort of representing that there may be later hours of operation, but it's not going to be a large.
No.
A large event. It's
no.
Kind
we
of a
just wanted to keep
event.
a little flexibility in that if we could.
Okay. Are there other questions? Go ahead.
I have a design question. If in fact the facility does stay open till 11 o'clock, what kind of lighting are you planning to have right outside, and how would that impact the neighborhood?
Let's see, at this point on the plans, we don't really show any exterior lighting other than the existing lighting on the building. And I believe there's now a light fixture at each of the doors, which are changing. That's one of the main components of what we're asking for here. The original use permit showed a storefront, aluminum storefront, and as the main entry, and then the original application adjacent to it showed an office window that was maybe 6 feet wide and 4 feet high. That's being changed into another storefront without a door. So at this juncture, there's no real plan for excessive light or extensive lighting. There may be more light coming from within the building out because there's more window. I believe a sign will be going up at some point for which we'll apply for a sign permit. That might include some illumination of the sign. But as it stands now, the lighting is minimal, it's hooded, it's shouldn't be visible directly by the neighbors.
Just, Esther, I did notice yesterday that there seems to be some existing wall packs. They're small, white, so are
can't hear
those
you.
remaining?
I'm sorry?
There are some existing wall packs I noticed on the side of the building there along Klaus. Oh, just, like small, surface mounted, like light. You wouldn't want to call them, they're nicer than security light, but they're kind of like a, functional. Yeah, I noticed there was some existing. And I just want to say, Morgan, I appreciate the design changes. I'm glad you were able to find a solution without having to use the easement in the back of the property. So,
Thank you.
and I don't know, is there any, no, I think that's it, sorry.
I had a question on the Exhibit B that we have for the use permit. There's mention of major activities, cheese making, shipping, and sales. And that's, regarding shipping, I was just wondering whether trucks may be coming and going and when that may be happening and what's the volume of this, this operation?
I'm not sure where that appears. What we are applying for here is for the middle part of the building, which is only the exhibition kitchen and the offices, windows in the front, some skylights in the roof. So in terms of what kind of supplies will be needed for the exhibition kitchen, those are minimal. That probably won't involve truck deliveries. Now, the wholesale kitchen, when it's up and running, which it isn't, that may become something that will happen. But the deliveries, I'll just say in advance now, the deliveries that would be involved in that, which is a vegan cheese making facility, really only involves a delivery of nuts and not the extensive number of different varied deliveries that would happen, say, when the Good Earth store was there. They would have a vast variety of different deliveries. So basically what the future kitchen will involve will be far less than the Good Earth, and what we're applying for now is nil.
Okay, it's just in recent memory, the Good Earth used to be located up on Bolinas, and behind it was a tofu factory that started very small, and then the trucks got more and more and more, and they finally had to leave the area.
Yeah, I'm well aware of Wildwood. I lived 2 doors down from it, and that was not affiliated with the Good Earth, though.
Right, so the concern is whether the cheese-making facility might turn into another Wildwood. I mean, I love their tofu, and I'm sure I'd love your cheese, but it's just a question of the impact on the neighborhood.
All I know is if you look at the trips per day calculations that were done, initially you'll see that I think when Good Earth was there was 1,200 trips per day, and I think what was speculated as to how many trips would be done given this facility or a future kitchen is far less, 10% maybe.
So as we're having this discussion, I'm looking, and I do have a question for staff now because I think it's a pertinent time. Linda or Jim. We approved a resolution that also talked about the wood-burning stove, and getting to the point that's being talked about, it had deliveries shall occur no earlier than 8 a.m. So those were conditions of Resolution 13-06. It said that changes to business hours, if they're before 8 a.m. or after 7 p.m., require a new use permit to come back to the Planning Commission. So that's basically where we are. The new resolution drops the conditions related to the wood-burning stove, drops the conditions related to deliveries. And my question is, are these additive resolutions, or is it important to make sure that the new resolution maintains what the old resolution has, and we're merely changing the hours, if that's really kind of
No, you
seems
should
the
definitely
discussion?
include the hour limitations on
on delivery. So,
vehicles. The wood-burning stove is already gone, correct?
Yeah, it's been removed.
I went in there
Okay.
and it's gone, so
Okay.
I don't think,
but I think it was, that was my
Yeah.
question, is essentially this becomes a standalone resolution, and there were some things discussed last time which are still pertinent, like deliveries for that
yeah, I would
wholesale,
put
so-
that back in.
Okay.
We didn't, staff did not knowingly remove that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I want to piggyback on that question back to staff. The 13-6 resolution had the museum set with the opening hours one Thursday a week till 9, so was that an intentional change because of the use of the space now with the new tenant, or is that one that should remain?
Well, I would ask the applicant that because I didn't think the museum was trying to change their hours. I thought they still wanted their original hours. Did they?
Yeah, the museum, nothing has changed there.
So if I change
I don't, has there been confusion created? Because any discussion of hours is strictly about the Miyoko's kitchen.
So what I'm hearing is we really should look back. So they are different, and what I'm hearing is that the application is really just asking either to add a bullet, not really change the resolution of everything else, but really add a bullet, changing the hours for the use of this retail mixed-use space. I guess it would be helpful to know if there's any other specific bullets that were added to this resolution. Again, I don't want to, our other option is simply to refer back to our,
to
I
modify the original
suppose we could
reso?
simply amend the,
Staff thought they took the original reso and just changed the number, changed the hours. So
Yeah.
if something got taken out, it was just definitely inadvertent. But I'm
Okay.
wondering if it's easier to just go back to your original
and maybe make a
resolution
slight change to that
And just
one.
change the hours. Yeah. Change the number of the resolution
Right.
and change the hours.
Because we don't want to undo everything that we did before. We're simply making a minor
Right.
modification to what's being proposed.
Or we could incorporate that portion of 13-6 into this resolution.
Yeah, if we can figure out which pieces are
Whatever
missing
you
or
think
not.
makes sense.
So.
I'm
Okay.
on it now, so.
All right. Okay, so we've resolved a little bit. Are there any more questions for Mr. Hall?
So my last one is, yeah, if there's any large-scale event planning, if the bike museum has an event for 100 people and this middle space decides to have an event for 100 people, could we have 200 people using this space up until 9, 10 at night on a given night? And so I think that's just my concern around the parking issues.
I do not know what events the bike museum is planning. I know it's likely that they'll have things going on. I know on Thanksgiving they had the annual turkey ride Thanksgiving morning, and they had a lot of bicyclists out in front after the end of the ride of the Pine Mountain Loop. That typically used to happen in Lydia's parking lot, but now that the museum's there, it's kind of happening in that parking lot. But that's in the morning, and it's bicycles, not cars. And certainly at this juncture, the Miyoko's kitchen people, I don't believe, have any specific plans for any large gathering of people. I really don't know.
Okay. But it does sound like if we were concerned, we could, based on that kitchen space, would 20 or 25, no more than 20 or 25, is that a reasonable number? Like you said, there's 15 or 16 chairs.
Yeah, I would think for a demonstration class, yeah, that would be probably reasonable. Yeah.
Okay. I think just having those open in case kind of questions. Any more, and then I want to open it up to public.
I just have a general question for the applicant and also possibly for staff in terms of this concept of a use permit that has different allowable operating hours and different days where you can have it later for the front of a building versus the back of a building as opposed to just the whole building. Is that, and again, so say the kitchen leaves and the landlord needs to get a new tenant that needs slightly different hours, they're going to have to come back in for a use permit every time tenancy changes that might change these hours? Is that what
Well,
I'm?
you guys actually included a condition. Your first condition is that if there's changes in the uses, they come back to you. And so they have to come back anyway, unless it's another wholesale food production place. They'd be subject to the same hours that this wholesale food is subject to. And I think the reason I know why you did it, because it's a kind of a sensitive neighborhood. And so noise and extended hours, it does wear on the neighbors.
Okay. So at this time, I'd like to open it up to the public. If anyone from the public has comments on this application, name, address, 3 minutes. All right. I'm not seeing anyone, so there we go. I will close the public comment period and bring it back to the commission for discussion. I think a couple of us are kind of going through and comparing the two, and I'm seeing a few changes, but not a huge number of changes, so I think we can kind of work and move them into the new resolution. That might
Now that I
be
looked
the
at it more
cleanest.
closely, I would agree it's better to do it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
One change I'd like to make is in the new resolution, if we pass one tonight, that we use instead of paragraph 13, that we use the new indemnity language. Thanks.
So can we clarify, are we going back to the old resolution and making amendments, or are we starting with the new resolution? Which one are we doing?
So I just was quickly looking at the new resolution and looking back at the old resolution, and I think we can carry forward. There were 3 or 4 paragraphs in the old resolution that we can carry forward to the new resolution, and everything else looked rather consistent.
But there are also things in the new resolution that were not in the old resolution.
Correct.
And that's
And I
one of
wasn't.
those.
I don't know what's.
Okay.
Seems to me better to add to the new resolution if there are other
Okay,
things.
so we're going to start with the new resolution and
Add from the
add
old.
back in from the old.
Yep. And just to articulate what I was getting at, and I think actually the applicant has addressed the concerns that I had, which it did look like a big change in hours. I think the scale that's being described is reasonable. I think it would be good I'd be happy to articulate that in some way, not as a limit, but based in my comfort is because it's 20 to 25 or 15 to 25, not, if it was 50 or 100 people at 11 p.m. any night of the week, because that's kind of what's being requested, I wouldn't be comfortable with that. So I was looking at some of these, and I can identify the ones I've seen, and then we'll have others add. And I always work from the back to the front. I don't know why. So if you go to the new condition, the new resolution, on the last page of that resolution, the page that starts with 12, condition 12, that was condition 13 of the old resolution. The item identified 13, what's been proposed by Commissioner Green is to revise that with the town's indemnity, the new language for indemnity. There was a statement about tree removal permit, and I don't think we need to address that at this time.
Is there a number 15 left out?
So there would be,
So
the
are
old
you-
number 15 was about tree removal, and I don't think we need to move that in.
It is, number 14. Yeah.
Oh,
It is still there.
okay, so that one's still there, but I don't know if that applies.
Well, it's,
Oh, there's no 15. It goes
I
14,
would just leave it in.
Okay, we'll leave it in.
It's just kind of a reminder that if they want to take a tree out, they need to get a tree removal permit. If they never change any of the trees on the site or along the street, it's just there to remind them. Or if the property changes hands.
I mean, there is a tree where the sign is, so That would be, cover that in case something happened in the future.
Okay, so that one should remain 14. What's listed as 16 should be 15. That was in there. And then the last two were dropped, and I think based on the fact that the wood-burning stove from staff has been removed, I would actually just say the wood-burning stove has been removed and no new wood-burning stove would be authorized, showing changes. And then the last condition that was in the old one was deliveries shall occur no earlier than 8 a.m. And I think we want to make sure that's still in there.
What about just saying, no deliveries shall occur outside of the authorized business hours?
Well, that could get you till 11 p.m., which I guess, we were
Well,
trying to
don't-
put a limit on the morning time. I just
But
want to
this-
be consistent with what we had.
Although the saying delivery shall occur no earlier than 8 a.m. doesn't say anything about how late they can occur.
Right.
And if we just say shall not occur outside of the authorized business hours, then if we ever should in the future go change those business hours and forget to change, I think the less multiple places where you've got hours that you have to go back and change if you change another one might be more consistent. Personally, I think it's just cleaner.
And when you say normal business hours, you're talking 8 to 7.
Approved business hours as approved in their use permit.
The 8 to 7, not the late at night for the demonstration kitchen, right? 8 to 7 is when the wholesale food is operating.
Right. And we could
I just
clarify
want to be
that to
clear because
wholesale
people, if
commercial
people can
kitchen.
argue with staff, they will argue with us. So
Well, yeah, exactly,
we'll make
exactly.
sure that the business hours are for the wholesale food operation from 8 to 7.
Right. So then I guess what I would propose is that we say deliveries shall occur no earlier than 8 a.m. or later than the hours. So deliveries shall occur only during the hours of the commercial,
Well,
the wholesale commercial kitchen operation.
What was the idea behind the delivery shall occur no earlier than 8 a.m.? It was to prevent noise to
Early in the
waking
morning.
up people.
Yeah.
I would leave it as it is myself.
I was starting with, I just want to keep the old resolution and not create a whole new one. Not that either way is simple. So I'm comfortable either way.
Well, I really would like to recommend keeping the language of 18 in the old resolution into the new one.
Okay, and then the other big change that we need to make sure, if we simply carry 18 across from Resolution 13.6 over to the new resolution, is I think it sounds like what we should do is actually, under item 3 of the approval, we don't have page numbers on any of these, but it's not under the subject to the conditions, it's the findings. Item 3, business hours of operation. I think what we're talking about doing is make sure that the first bullet, which refers to the museum, that's identified in Resolution 13-6 is reflected in the new resolution.
It is different. The original one, the museum was Thursday 11 to 9 and Friday through Wednesday 11 to 7. The
Right.
new one is Thursday through Monday 11 to 7. So it is a change.
And what I was hearing
And
is
I
that
don't think that they requested that.
they
I
didn't
think
request
that's-
that, so we should just maintain
I don't know
what
how
was
that
in the old
happened,
one. So it's a clarification, it's not a change, it's just,
The only other change, though, is that they're losing, the old one had an assumption that they were going to be using the in-between space for some of the time. So if they're not now going to be able to use that in-between space, was there an intention to change the hours? No. Okay, so we're just, fine.
I didn't hear that was a request. I didn't hear a request specific to the museum. I just don't want to go through this and accidentally change things. If there's a request to change it, we should consider it, but I don't want to accidentally change it.
But Jim had a point. This body is the one that made the change to be more flexible for them. They weren't requesting it. So I think if we go with what they were requesting, we should be okay. So go back to the original resolution. Just keep the language the same.
For the office, retail, now it's been revised to office, retail, demonstration kitchen. So I think the second bullet that's presented in the new resolution for the times is what's being requested, but that needs to be revised to 2 nights per week until 9, twice per month until 11. And then the third bullet should be added, which was straight across from the old resolution 13-6, which is the wholesale commercial kitchen, Sunday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And this proposal basically allows us to drop the fourth bullet from the old resolution, because we're talking about the center commercial space. And then I think I hate to add whereas is. I'd like somewhere to reflect the changes in hours, the evening hours, because the use is expected to, draw no more than 20 to 25 visitors during these hours. That it's a reasonable accommodation, something like that. Yeah.
So you want to add that as like a finding 12?
Can we do that?
Yeah.
I just want to be able to kind of point to why those later hours are reasonable. So it'd be a new finding.
You could say that the finding is that given that the use is of a classroom workshop nature, not, I don't know if you want to say not, but to distinguish it from kind of grand event space, so that would be the condition. Some language around, given that the demonstration kitchen area is of a workshop classroom nature.
It's not expected to generate, do you want to set?
It's not expected to generate
a significant
amount of noise.
Or traffic.
Or traffic. Foot traffic, yeah.
Yeah, I think that just helps put it in the context, and really the last time when we had these discussions, there was concern. We didn't hear that from the public tonight, but I think it's still important to reflect that.
How about given...
Well, no, I have a comment. I think the hours of operation are too open-ended, especially if the event or the class occurs on a weekday. 11 o'clock, I think, is too late. I don't know if we need to specify if that's on the weekends or if we need to reduce it. I think 11 is too late. So, but to me, it's too open-ended.
So one of the things we've done in the past, and I think given that we could consider, is something like Sunday through Thursday, so till 9, Friday, Saturday till 11. So the 11 o'clock events would only be on Friday night or Saturday night, and the 9 o'clock events could be Sunday night through Wednesday night.
So that would just be a modification to say, and 2 times a month on either Friday or Saturday, remaining open until 11 p.m.
Got it.
We almost have to make a gridded box for this, but I think that's what we're trying to address.
Mr. Chair, out of
Yes.
courtesy, you might just ask the applicant if that produces any problems with any classes they were foreseeing during the week. She's here, I think.
That would be great.
Hi, I'm Lisa Shanauer. I'm CEO of Miyoko's Kitchen. And, the nature of the events are Whoops, sorry. The nature of the events are educational. They're not raucous band parties. So my partner Miyoko Shinner is a renowned vegan chef and speaker around the world. I have her booked in 9 weekends already over the next 4 months, talking about the amazing product that she's going to make and promoting her other cooking shows and things. So limiting her to just be able to teach a later evening class, people come from all over the Bay Area to learn from Miyoko. So it's difficult to get to Fairfax by 6 o'clock on a Thursday night. I just drove from Oakland myself, so I can attest. So I would request that you consider people's ability to come and hear Miyoko. She has a wide draw, so traffic in the Bay Area would make limiting Friday and Saturday night difficult for us.
And just, that's for 9 p.m. and 11 p.m., or that's, I guess that's what we were trying to differentiate. You're saying any event is a late night event. Are you saying 9 p.m. is not late enough, or? Good.
Got it. What I thought I heard was the request that the 11 p.m. events be limited to Friday and Saturday only. And I believe that would be too limiting for our business.
Would it be okay to reduce it to 10? If you want it open-ended? I just think 11 o'clock is too late for the neighborhood on a weekday.
My red light is still lit, and I'll say 10 o'clock is just fine as a compromise.
It seems to me that by limiting it to only Friday and Saturday, that may create more of an overlap with the museum, because I would expect that any events that they have are on those nights also. So to allow for a class to go a little bit later during the weeknights may be actually reducing the impact in this area, because those museum events are more likely to be on the weekends. So 10 o'clock's great. Thank you for being flexible.
Of course.
That's kind of something to consider.
I'm here if you need me.
I guess a different question is, if we had till 10 o'clock, do we need to have one twice a week, twice a month? Can we just say 10 o'clock?
Well, just
I don't know.
A couple of things that the applicant mentioned, that they're popular, going to draw a crowd from the entire Bay Area, number one. And number two, I mean, I do think there's a great marriage here with the museum and a restaurant. This doesn't seem to be just a restaurant. It seems to be a very popular cooking program that makes me concerned about traffic.
I'm not hearing that the numbers change. Just because there's a wider draw, it's just a greater area of draw. It doesn't change the capacity of the space. So I'm not as worried about that as much as, and I didn't read that it was a restaurant. Is it it's not a restaurant, is it? Okay. So I feel it's the capacity doesn't change. It's just that people coming from further away. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting concerned about is you get back into how reasonable is this to even deal with. So you're open till 7, and then twice a week, we don't know what nights, you're open till 9, and then twice a month you're open till 11, and it's impossible to police. And I guess what I'm getting at is, could we just say 3 times a week till 10, and then it's straightforward. We don't have to say, oh, I used my 11 o'clock, but I didn't use a 9 o'clock, or vice versa. This one went late, so that's my 11 o'clock, but I still just make it simple. Maybe 3 nights a week till 10. That actually adds options, but makes it a little bit easier to deal with, and still maintains flexibility.
I think that makes a lot of sense, both from a staff perspective. I think it makes sense from a neighborhood perspective as well, because it's much easier as a neighborhood to monitor, wait a minute, that was 5 times a week and they're only supposed to have 3. So from a neighborhood perspective, I think it also helps make it easier to be objectively monitoring the activity, so.
It's also way more than what the applicant's asking for, which is nice and friendly.
Okay, so is that a workable solution, is 10 PM 3 nights a week? And then-
Let's give it a try.
All right, is that workable? Okay. All right. And we'll make, it'll make all the details here much simpler to repeat. All right. Any other comments, or are we good for, do we need to read back for all these changes? Are we kind of good? We're good? Okay. All right. We like that. So is there a motion with all these amendments? Do I hear anyone?
I make a motion to approve resolution number 14.8 with the changes to .3 business hours for the museum to remain as it was on resolution 13.6. For the office, retail demonstration, and commercial kitchen operations to be 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. and 3 times per week operating until 10 p.m. And we say retain the commercial kitchen hours Sunday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. To add .12 with our findings, given that the demonstration kitchen use is of a classroom workshop education nature, it's not expected to generate a significant amount of traffic and noise. On the whereas, to change number 16 to reflect it's actually .15, to add back condition 18 from resolution 13.6 that deliveries shall occur no earlier than 8 a.m. And to also add a whereas the wood-burning stove has been removed and no new oven will be put in place. Wood-burning oven will be put in place.
And to update the indemnification condition to our new language.
And to, update the indemnification language.
Excellent, thank you.
And I have a potential friendly amendment or clarification. Whereas, on the old one, whereas number 9 about prior to project final inspection, historic letter of action, remove corrugated metal roof, that is gone. We didn't talk about it earlier, so.
It's gone because we were able to verify with the help of the architect that that was approved, and we found minutes, and so it's been approved that way, so it no longer needs to be removed.
Track my friendly amendment.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
I second that.
So we'll do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. So a little bit of work, but it passes. There is an appeal period, so check in with town staff before proceeding too far. But that's $500 and 10 days. So thank you. We are going to keep this on moving. The next item tonight is 6 Bridge Court, application 14-15.
Okay, we gave a rather detailed explanation of what the project entails in the staff report, but basically they are trying to expand the second floor. They are in a flood zone, and so in order to comply with FEMA regulations, they are asking to raise the existing house up and expand the lower floor, keeping it out of the floodway. And we actually did meet with, now I lost his card. Building official and I met with Michael Hornick, who's a National Hazard Program Specialist, and took him out to the site just to make sure that he felt they were actually getting everything out of the floodway, and he felt certain based on the plans that they were. So anyway, it's a 50% remodel, and it requires the approval of the following discretionary permits. It requires a use permit because the project doesn't meet the minimum size and width requirements based on its average slope. It's a 50% remodel, so it requires design review, and it is required to bring the parking on the site into compliance with the current parking regulations. And so in order to bring the parking into compliance with the current regulations, they are requesting setbacks. The code prohibits parking being located in a side yard setback, and they are proposing one of the uncovered spaces to be in the side yard setback, but it will maintain a significant 14-foot setback from the nearest residence at 89 Dominga. So we feel that will meet the intent of the 5-foot side yard setback and not significantly impact the neighbor. What was the other variance? There was only one variance to park in the side yard setback. And then design review, the proposed architecture of the project meets the criteria set forth in the design review ordinance. And so we are recommending that you approve the project based on the findings and subject to the conditions contained in the staff report.
Thank you. So, questions for staff? I do have a couple. What would the height limit be if the slope of this property were 14.95%?
It would be 35 feet.
So it's at 10%
It's a
where
10,
it's a change?
the difference changes
Okay.
at 10%, and
And this is 35 because it's a downslope
Right.
property, even though
it's a downslope from the street.
it's from the address,
Mm-hmm.
which has always been curious to me.
Right.
Okay, so 10%, that's good. I'm glad we're not down to tenths of percentages to be a big difference in the structure. Okay, and then as part of this, the house is being raised. One of the reasons it seemed like it was really, but it's within the 35 feet. So I think what I was wanting to clarify is that the town has a 28.5 foot limit for less than 10% and for upslope lots, and a 35-foot limit for downslope lots, and that's driven by the address of the property to determine upslope or downslope.
From the street frontage. So if it slopes down from
But
the
if you have
Ridgecourt-
two street frontages, it's your address.
Yes,
So,
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Any other questions?
I don't know if you're the correct person to answer, but the one exhibit A23 that was in color, I'd appreciate some kind of explanation what the different colors were, because I didn't notice a key, and I just wanted to understand it better.
I don't have one in color, so I may ask the architect to help me. But I believe, Rich, correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, you can't remember? I'm going to give it a shot. Okay, so the red line, I believe, is the floodway. No, that's not right. The yellow is the floodway, and the blue is the flood zone. So this property is in a flood zone. It also has portion of the property in the floodway. FEMA won't allow you to build in the floodway. You can build in the flood zone as long as you raise the finished floor above the flood elevation. So you'll see the addition, and I know the line's really fat, but that's why we actually asked the specialist to come out and look at this, because we were concerned that maybe that one corner was extending into the floodway, but he felt certain that it was not. So they've got their addition out of the floodway, and they are raising the whole structure. The lower floor is actually below the flood, well below the flood elevation right now, so they're getting the floor of the existing house up out of the flood, above the flood level, base flood elevation.
Do you know anything about the environmental impact on the creek? Are they driving piles, or how are they doing that?
I believe it is piles, but you might ask the architect. They're pretty far away from the top of the creek bank where they're going to be doing this. And when we talked to the specialist, he was aware of the type of foundation they were going to use and actually was in favor of that because you have the piles and it actually allows floodwater to move, underneath the building. So he didn't seem to think there was going to be a problem with that.
Okay, thanks. I just was environmental impact that I was.
Right. They have to put in place when they're building all the mixed stop regulations, which they have to put out filters so no dirt runs into the creek, and we'll make sure that those are in place before we issue the building permit.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I have one question. Has a neighbor been notified about the third parking space going into the, a variance for the third parking space going into the setbacks?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the question.
Has a neighbor been notified about the parking going
Yes,
into
the
the
neighbor
setbacks?
received a notice, and I actually spoke to the property owner about the project, who lives on the other side, but she owns this residence, so she was well aware of the meeting and might be here tonight. I don't know if I see her or not, but
Okay.
Go ahead.
So could you walk through that variance again, the setback? Because when I looked at the numbers on your table, the setbacks, the side setbacks on the table, looks like the proposed is 7.5 and 34, but you mentioned a 14-foot setback? Could you just walk through
the table is the setback for the structures. And what I was stating is...
Not the parking?
No, the
Okay.
parking's going to go right up to the property line, as does a lot of parking in that neighborhood. But it's going to still maintain, the parking space is still maintaining a 14-foot setback from the nearest neighboring structure. So the distance between the neighbor's house and the parking space is 14 feet.
Okay. Are we ready for the applicant? Okay. Happy to give a little background, and we'll have some
good
questions.
evening. I'm Yannick with Russian Shartok Architects, and I think Linda had a pretty comprehensive presentation on what we're doing. And so basically we're adding a kitchen to the lower floor, expanding a bedroom office upstairs that's already existing over an existing deck. We are removing an existing office space, which is being used as a flex space room now. That's closer to the creek, so we're actually taking the building farther away from the creek and kind of building the space back towards the middle of the property. That's kind of the basis of what the clients are after.
And can you address, there was a question up here about the piers. Are they drilled piers, or they're not driven?
Yeah,
I'm
at this point
assuming.
we're thinking about drilled piers.
Okay.
So ultimately, when you make this improvement, the house will be more on solid footing, less likely that a flood would hurt it, and it would be survive a flood better.
Correct, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay.
Actually, I do have
Okay,
one.
we got one more
Okay,
question
I just
for
have
you.
one question, and I just wanted to say that this is a really nice solution to a lot of challenges. So I commend you on that. I just have a question about one of your elevations. It's your west elevation, and you can look at this later if you don't have the drawings. You have it there. It's on A 7.1. One of the windows is really low to close to the grade, and I was just wondering, I couldn't figure out what that window was for or where it was. It looks like it's at the stairs.
Yeah, these are existing openings.
Oh, those are existing.
They're existing openings. They're actually an existing door, French door. And so we're going to retain those openings, keep the headers in place, get rid of the doors, and get some windows there. Those go to a laundry room to get some light into that back space so it's not too dark.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this item? Please come up, state your name, address, make sure the red light's on. We got 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Dustin Liebman. I actually live at 102 Dominga, but I received a phone call and an email today from friends of mine who are both residents on Dominga Avenue as well, which are neighbors to this project. And they had asked me to come and stay with them because they could not be here. So I was actually, I got an email today from Laura Kimpton, who is the owner of 93 Dominga Avenue, and also representation of her brother Graham, who rents the property at 89 Dominga. They both, obviously brother and sister, were called out due to a family emergency, so she had contacted me to see if she could be represented. In no way did she say she wanted to stop the project, but wanted to petition for an extension of the decision to permit the construction project taking place at Sixth Bridge Court in Fairfax. Due to family emergency, Graham and I both have to leave town and will not be able to attend today's town council meeting. I'm here. She's seen the plans for the proposed project and have concerns with the proximity of the addition remodel to her house, specifically a window she had mentioned to me, as well as some issues regarding the permitting process itself, regarding some personal issues between her and her brother, and times and weekends, things like that. So she had asked for an extension if it was possible for me to ask for it because she's unable to attend.
Okay. Thanks. I think it's also often staff does get letters, emails, kind of up till the last second on these, and it always helps that it comes to them to and articulate as best they can some of the concerns. Like windows, those are things we can certainly talk about, but some of the others, it's hard to know.
Linda's looking right now at the Permit Streamlining Act.
It's a little unfortunate because this one, they agreed to time extensions because they were having issues with FEMA and trying to get the house, deciding what to do, how significant of a project to do. So we're already at the time limit. You have to take action on this tonight. They're only allowed to extend the time processing for one 90-day period, which they've already done.
So it sounds like there's two options. One is to
may I add?
And what I was getting at by that is that sometimes if there's more detail provided to staff, they can actually identify what the concern is and raise it. We get those letters. So.
No, I guess we're still okay for one more continuance because it's 90 days from April 16th. And our meeting, does anyone have a calendar? Our meeting in July is the 15th? 15th, is that correct? When's our meeting in July? Oh, so we're just going to miss it. Nope.
So can I ask, Mr. Chair?
You could continue it to a date, continue it to a special meeting.
So in lieu of that option, did they give you any other indications besides the window of concern, and did they specify which window was of concern?
I know which window.
You went, okay.
I know which window, but I don't know what these other issues are.
Okay, did they mention any other issues?
There was the window, which obviously you're aware of. The other issue was time of, there was concern regarding.
I know. I think I know what her other issue was. She wanted to request that you place a similar condition, ask the applicant how long they felt construction was going to go on, and that you put a condition in place limiting, that they have to get the project done in a timely fashion. She was concerned that it would drag on, and I tried to explain to her that I didn't think that was going to be the case because it's such a significant project that I'm pretty sure the owner's going to have to move out, right, while it's happening. And so usually those projects happen pretty quickly.
And with regards to the window,
yeah,
what is the issue?
And she wanted to request that the window, let me find the elevation. So she was concerned about the window on A72, the small window. I believe, I can't, let me see, it's the bathroom. Yeah, it's a bathroom window, and it is now a clear story window. But what she asked is there any way that window could be removed and they could add a window facing her brother's rental property? That was her take at the time, because it's further away from his house, and this side of the house is actually 2 feet from her property line.
Which elevation?
Yeah, it's the proposed west elevation.
And may I, Mr. Chair, may I ask the speaker, and that I presume the concern there is because of the close proximity of the bathroom with the view between the two?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so was there any discussion about frosting the window or something like that, where it's like opaque, it lets light in, but it's opaque in terms of visibility?
No. I know that she had, as she had talked to Linda about, it was a movement of it,
Okay, thank you. I just would point out that.
You might just start by asking the applicant if they're willing to relocate it, and then you wouldn't have to try to figure out if she might be willing to have a frosted window since she's not able to be here.
So it sounds like the question is, could the window be moved from the west? I'm assuming it's the large window on the west elevation. It's the little one on the carport?
The second floor.
Okay.
On the second floor.
If that could be moved from the west elevation to the...
It is.
It looks high, too.
It is. It's a clear story window.
To the
It's
north.
a high window.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily, it's going to be up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Messenger.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Mr. Chair, you might want to conclude.
Sorry. So I think we've got all your comments, is that right?
Yeah.
I want to make sure there's nobody else from the public that has any comments. Or do you have a comment
If you don't,
specifically?
I guess the question would be, is there the possibility for a continuation of it with any other questions she might have or concerns?
So one of the things that we were talking about is the Permit Streamlining Act, and if we don't act tonight, what's being asked for could actually be, whether we act or not, could be approved. So we're actually trying to address the concerns that we've heard.
Okay.
But because of the Permit Streamlining Act, there are some limitations to
Understandable.
continuance.
We have to act by a certain time.
I understand that, and I know you had mentioned.
Yeah, and just for the record, there is an appeal process.
Right.
It's $500 within 10 days, and I know it costs some money, but there is that right also, should the commission not continue this, and she's unhappy with any part of the project that she hadn't had time to study because of the emergency.
Okay. With that being said, is there the possibility for a special meeting?
So I think at this point, we can have that discussion, but, we have to make other considerations of our time and availability, et cetera.
I know as well, one of the other things that she had expressed, and I don't know the personal details of it, but it had to do with the timing, not only of the length of project, but also having to do with the time of start of project in terms of morning hours, for whatever reason that was, and there was a personal situation regarding that. I don't know whether it's health, medical related or whatnot, but that was something else she had brought up to me, and having concern over that. And as
Idea what time would be acceptable to her?
she mentioned 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. Okay.
Yeah, and I mentioned around 9 o'clock, and I had mentioned something about work on weekends. I wasn't specific on the weekend request, but I did know she mentioned something about 9 o'clock in terms of starting work. So those were the two things that she specifically mentioned to me, was the window and that piece of it, the concern over the length of project and the morning start time.
Okay,
So,
and we can certainly discuss those items. Is there anyone else from the public that wants to speak to this item? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment. Push the button again to the light. Thanks. Bring it back to the commission for discussion. And I'm going to reiterate, because I think it's important, especially things like that. Even if you're not here, if you write an email to staff, those kinds of things can be talked about and brought up, and it doesn't have to be I appreciate you bringing that forward. It's kind of a tough role to be in. But the direct emails are actually really simple and great ways to get a lot of comments in. So I know we actually do put conditions usually on start times and things like that, usually not 9 a.m. So that's certainly something that would be different. It sounds like you were looking at windows.
She's looking at, remember, we made revisions to the time of construction, and we narrowed the windows already. And I just would like to point out, it's kind of a catch-22, because on the one hand, we want to make the project get done sooner,
Right.
and on the other hand, you're limiting the hours of construction. Or you're asking for, it's a counterintuitive request.
Right. That's a, both things matter. And was there any discussion on the windows? I don't have enough information to make a judgment. It sounds like this is a clear story window, which is above sight line. It's just letting light in. It sounds like it could be frosted, but I'm not sure of the alignment of that bathroom. Are there windows on both walls, or is it just on the one wall? And would it be possible or feasible to have it on the other wall, where it wouldn't affect this neighbor? It is a possibility if we were to identify that as an item.
And Mr. Chair, forgive
Yes.
me, we just verified that we restricted the construction hours on the weekend to a start time at 9 in the morning and a finish at 4 already, globally.
And weekdays is 8 till 6, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So those are the standard construction times. Okay. Go ahead.
Do we have any sense of how long this project is going to take? Do you have any sense? Have we? Roughly? 4.5. Okay.
So
I heard 4.5
4.5
months.
months,
Roughly.
very roughly.
From building permits.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any sort of general comments? I think we've had a few specific ones. It sounds like there's possibility to adjust the window if there's high concern. We can put some timelines around construction. My personal on the construction timing is, I agree, there's limitations to either how fast it gets done or how long you work. And we did adjust the town's noise ordinance to try to accommodate some of that pretty recently, actually. So, any comments?
So is there a way to say that moving that window is one possibility and frosting it is another, and letting the applicant work it out with the neighbor? Because
Absolutely.
they're different. If it's a light emitting issue, then we want to move the window, but if it's just a visibility, then it might be a simpler solution.
And it might help if the architect got together with the neighbor and showed from the inside, interior elevations, the height of that window.
I was going to suggest a similar suggestion. One question, it looks, I think that the architect had mentioned that, can they verify what is the distance from the west side of the building to the property line? Because it looks like it's less than 5 feet.
Yeah, I scaled it on page A23 at 2.25 feet.
Okay, I think I'd have to verify with the building code, but I believe there's a restriction when you've got,
openings
with
anyway.
less than 3 feet. So it
Correct.
might be that
A
you may
moot
not
point.
be able to put anything on that
Good
side.
eye,
You
good
are
eye, in
correct.
which case we could catch that with this flexibility during the permitting, building permitting. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know how it works because they're eliminating, yeah, you're right.
think
Can-
if
are
it's
you know
ex-
if you can move them? I mean, like they eliminated one. That still doesn't mean they can put it somewhere else, right?
But it's existing non-conforming for the new regs.
Okay, well, yeah, if it's existing, it can remain, but
Right.
if they're new, then that puts.
Right, but the other, where they would move it to is around the corner where it doesn't have that close proximity to the property line.
Right.
Okay,
So
one-
just to be clear, it would come up, whether we made a condition or not, that if it's a new window at the building code or the building permit issuance stage?
Yeah,
Is that what I
they
heard?
can't propose anything that doesn't comply with the building code. So
Okay.
they'll either have to show that there's some kind of legal non-conforming aspect that they retain the right to keep a window there,
All right.
or they'll have to take it out and move it.
But at this stage, making it sort of, making a new condition that it gets worked out sort of addresses that issue and it will be resolved,
Right,
whatever. Okay.
right.
We
Rich,
don't,
do you-
we don't
do you-
have to determine that tonight, I guess.
You do know, you guys did think about the fact that the building code doesn't allow you to have openings in walls that are 3 feet. Is there some kind of,
It has to be protected glass.
oh, okay. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So less than 3 feet, it has to be protected glass. Less than 5 feet, it can't be operable, is what was, in case the audience can't hear. Okay, so, but I do think the work together solution is a good way to address it and kind of raise it, allow that to be considered. Are there any other comments? I know we've added conditions specific to completion, with a time certain from the date of the building.
Can
permit
I back up a
issuance.
second for a moment? Could you just reiterate for the gentleman that spoke on the neighbor's behalf where you're landing on this? You're saying that either the window where it exists now will be frosted, so it lets light through, but it's opaque in terms of visibility of people on one side or the other, or it be allowed to move around the corner where it's no longer there, and that those options remain open, and that the owner is encouraged to meet with the neighbor you're representing to discuss from the inside how high that existing window is, and hopefully come to an amicable resolution as to whether or not to keep it with her feeling comfortable or to move it around the corner.
So,
What happens as a result of that?
so I think what we're addressing the situation by basically having that determined not tonight, but with staff and the applicants and the neighbor, come to a resolution, and that's what moves forward. And
They either have to make her
before the
happy
building
where it
permit's
is or move it.
issued. So it's setting up that condition that dialogue happens. It's not happening tonight. It can't happen tonight. And there's other questions which if she were here tonight we could ask, but she's not. And this actually allows that dialogue to occur after this meeting without holding the process up. So, yeah, I want to make sure that we're not this, and I think you're doing a good job of representing your neighbor and friend, but this is not we are addressing the concerns that have been raised. And we can explain it as we go through. What we're talking about is actually adding a condition to if we issue a permit to the authorization that requires this to happen. That's what we're talking about doing. That's what's been proposed. So.
And in terms of requesting a later start time for weekdays, is that possible?
So we are having a dialogue now, and we've heard all of the concerns that have been raised. And whether they're all answered or not right this second, I can't tell you, but we will be discussing it. All right. So it sounds like if we were to look at a condition, it would be like an added condition under item 2, like a 2G, and we can develop the language there.
I have
related
some
to the
language
window.
I've been writing if you want me to suggest it.
Sure.
And that the small window in the west elevation at page A 7.2 issue shall be resolved by the neighbors meeting and conferring inside to discuss how to deal with that window.
With the added caveat that the resolution shall either be moving the window or frosting the window.
Excellent.
You should also add that it's at the upper floor because there's windows on the lower floor as well.
Okay, so that's getting at the window question. We've heard concerns related to the timing of the construction, and I'm quickly looking for where we actually address timing. I think in general, we require it to be with town.
2A is the construction management plan document that they're required to address hours, parking. It says construction schedule, but that is a part of this construction schedule. But it doesn't actually say the length of construction, but it could be, we can add it as part of that.
Well, should we say more than construction shall be completed in a timely manner?
I guess what I was bringing up is we've had a few items where we've had a condition that within a year of the building permit being issued, I think we had 2 items last month that I recall. We kind of had that same concern about finishing the project, make sure it doesn't draw out forever.
Correct. There was the one on Spruce Road, and there was
right.
another one where you did set a time limit.
Right. So that's a condition that we've used a few times. I like that we've now integrated the parking plan, is now kind of regular language. That's good.
Yeah, and I'd like to just highlight the times where we have had to really get into the completion of the projects have been when they've come back for another application and there's been serious issues with it dragging and dragging and dragging. This one, as you said, they're going to move out. They've said 4 months, which give me the name of your contractor because that's great. So I really don't think there's no indication here that this is going to be a problem. So I think the faster it gets done, the better for the neighbors. I would tend to err on the side of let them get it done faster rather than limit the hours, personally.
Yeah, I think that's my comment as well. 8 a.m. is a reasonable time unless there's some other extenuating circumstance to make it more restrictive. Faster is better.
I agree, and having a longer day is just a more efficient construction process than having shorter days that drag on, and it will drag on if you can't get your work done in a day. So I think in requesting both of those things, then you can't have both. This is the one that would get us to the end line faster. So.
Okay, so am I hearing that we would propose a condition or for completion time, or we feel that this applicant hasn't proven that they won't, which is when we've used it in the past?
I think it can just be part of the document as to what a reasonable estimated time can be just included in the document without putting a time restriction on it. I think, though, we should list that it should be one of the requirements that they need to state what is the estimated length of construction.
So you're saying that you want, when they bring in the construction plan, within the construction plan it has the estimated length of construction?
Yes.
Great. I like that.
And I'm happy to also have language, the construction plan shall include an estimate of a completion date that shall be within a reasonable, timely manner.
So it sounds like that would essentially amend the bullet 2. So 2A, bullet 2, construction schedule, and just list out estimated length of construction as another thing. I want to make sure we don't lose any other comments, concerns, questions that have been raised. I think we've addressed the 2 that have been raised on
Can
time.
we say construction in a timely manner consider according to the construction plan?
On the second bullet, sure.
Yeah, we want the plan shall show that or shall identify it. That's all we're asking for, is that it includes it. So I want to make sure we get past these two items, make sure there's not any other issues that are of concern. This is a design review, this is for 50% remodel. Any other concerns, questions need to be addressed? There's materials up there. Yeah, I wasn't sure if we could pull that. We probably need to pull that off the wall just so we can see the
We're looking for the materials board.
I think
They
you
don't
just
seem to
addressed
be
it
part of it.
in the attached color elevations, because most of the material is just going to remain the existing shingles for the house. And then there's going to be board and batten painted the dark brown color. But I can bring that over. But I think you all should have the lights that are proposed are there. Right, Rich? You oh, did some?
Just, I know I didn't see the FEMA map either, so but it's right there. We could just look at it really quick. Just to make sure we don't miss anything.
It's theirs.
Oh, that's the wrong one.
Yeah, that's
okay.
the wrong one.
So that isn't the right one. Sorry.
Sorry, forget it.
Linda, it's okay.
We got it. Oh, I was seeing the color palettes up there, but that's the next application. All right.
So with all of that said, I think this is a really nice solution on this house, and a good way to get it up out of the flood zone and make it a little more livable, and I think it's a great design, and I don't have any problem with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I applaud the ideas behind the designs, and that it should be a model for other Creekside homes that are in this situation.
Go ahead.
I echo everyone's comments. I think it was a very challenging site, and I commend you on your thoughtful solution, and I'm glad that you're able to work it out with FEMA and all the other regulations. I can see there was a lot of thought into the project.
Especially since the FEMA map's newly minted, like during the application, arrival, revision, things like that. So, yeah, and we've had a number of applications along creeks, but I think this one kind of, the removal of structures from the creek side area. I mean, those are all, it's unusual and to be commended. So, I echo everyone's statements. I think I want to make sure that. We have addressed the window. I think we've talked about a condition and length of construction. Just to speak to time of construction, there have been lots of concerns over the years about time of construction, how long it takes, as well as when construction starts and ends. And it is a fine balance. And I think we went through a lot of discussion around when noise is appropriate, inappropriate, and that really was the reflected in the town noise ordinance and the revisions that were made recently. And when those revisions were made, there were really large reductions in some of the times when construction noise would be allowed. So that is something that we have addressed, not just for this project, but town-wide. There's always going to be concerns, but it is a trade-off. So that said, is there a motion on this application?
I'd like to make a motion to approve application 14-15 with the, is it a additional finding for discussion between the architect and? Condition. It's a condition, not a finding. With the condition that a discussion take place on the placement of the second floor bathroom window, whether it gets moved to a different wall or whether it gets frosted to become opaque. And then adding to the condition number 2 in the bulleted list, some language that states the estimated length of construction, please.
Okay.
And then
The construction schedule shall include the estimated time of completion of the construction that is within a timely fashion. I have to read my own writing. Oh, I missed green. You said something about according to the construction plan, right? So it has to be in a timely fashion and in accordance with the construction plan.
That was my language, yes.
Okay, I think those are the only 2 additions that we have to this application.
And the first item that you amended, the work out the window, would be 2G, a new finding 2G. Or it's recommended condition 2G. Yes, sorry. So we have a motion. Is there a second?
I second that.
So we have a motion and a second. We'll do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. So the application passes. There is a 10-day appeal period. It's a $500 fee. So do check with town staff. And again, that condition really does raise communication between the applicant and the concerned neighbor. So
Staff will include a copy of, we'll send the letter of action with those items that addressed her concerns, arrowed to both her and her brother, so they're aware of it, and then they can contact me if they have questions.
Okay. All right. Are we good to keep rolling? We've got the next item on the agenda is 1 Arrowwood Lane. That's application 14-22.
Okay, this is part of a settlement agreement. It's one of the lots in the agreement between Fairfax Hills and the town of Fairfax, a Superior Court case. And the case set forth the building envelopes that the houses could be located in. It regulated the maximum size the houses could be, what types of improvements could be outside the building envelope. It didn't specify the type of materials, but it indicated that they had to blend in with the hillside. And they had to meet certain height regulations and parking requirements and lighting regulations. This one does comply with all the settlement agreement requirements. It's unusual because it requires a hill area residential development permit, and the other houses that you reviewed just needed design review because this site, they are going to have to do some excavation. The pad wasn't completed like the other sites, and so the town engineer has reviewed a number of plans and engineering reports, and he's determined that the excavation can occur and the HRD permit can be issued without grading and drainage improvements can be constructed, and all the other improvements can occur without negatively impacting the surrounding properties or the general public. And so we're recommending that you approve application 1422 by adopting the attached resolution 14.7, and we had a correction to that resolution because we want to remove condition 11, which talks about a swimming pool. This project doesn't include a swimming pool. So then we'll want to take out 11 and do the renumbering. And we also wanted to add a condition 15, which is standard and somehow got out, that the applicant needs to comply with all the conditions of a municipal water district, the Ross Valley Sanitary District, and the Ross Valley Fire Department. And then your standard condition that you've recently asked us to include, that the applicant has to comply with all conditions of other agencies unless the specific agency waives their conditions in a written letter to the Department of Planning and Building Services. So that would conclude our report.
Can you repeat the where the pool?
Page 5. The pool was condition 11 on page 5.
Oh. It only appears that part of condition 11 addresses the pool, only the latter part. At the beginning, it's talks about landscaping and meeting the MMWD requirement.
So just the pool excavation, because
Oh, you are correct.
He did
Okay.
evaluate the,
So I guess we can't
Stabilization.
eliminate it, and I think what we should do is make it 11A, prior to issuance of the building permit for the residents, the applicant shall provide verification to the town that the landscaping plan and residents have been approved by Marin Municipal Water District, period. Yeah, and then an 11B, so we want 11A and 11B, that the construction plans have been approved by a town engineer.
There doesn't appear to be a number 12. We could make it.
Well, but we're going to make,
Okay.
13 is going to become 12. Any exposed metal, flashing, or trim shall be dark, and that's a settlement agreement condition. And then 14 will become 13. 16 will become 14, and then we added 15 and 16. 15 was the applicant shall comply with all the conditions of the other agencies, and then 16 was that unless that agency waives their requirement.
And just to reiterate on number 11, you're just redacting the word pool.
Yeah, and splitting that into two conditions, I think it'll be more understandable. But you could leave it as one and just take out pool.
And then correctly numbering.
we're usually on top of that one. All right, so are there questions for staff at this point? I know the story polls have been up. When was the application deemed complete? You can, you can look it up as we're, okay. Okay.
The thing went out 10 days ago, and they were working things out with the engineer maybe a week before that. So you're still within.
It's fresh.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a logic question for staff. On page 5, where it says Hill Area Residential Development Permit and Excavation Permit, it's mentioned that the site has an average slope of 41% and the construction will require excavation and fill of 340 cubic yards of material. The project also requires excavation permit because it will require an excavation of over 100 yards of material. But I understand that 0 through 5% slope has 200 cubic yards requirement, and 31% has 50 cubic yards. So I don't know how that was calculated.
What page are you on again?
5 of the staff report under Hill Area Residential Development Permit and Excavation Permit. And looking back at the...
Okay, so I think I understand.
Okay, looking back at the ordinance, it doesn't seem to make sense that...
Yeah, there's 2 permits required. So the
Okay.
HRD, if you have over a certain slope and you're excavating over a certain amount, that's what kicks you into the HRD permit process. But we have a quirk in our code where we also have an excavation ordinance, and that ordinance says that if you're excavating over 100 cubic yards, you also need an excavation permit. And I think it's one of those things we're going to have to clean up when we redo the code, because I think they meant the HRD ordinance to take over for that excavation section, but the excavation section is in the town code part and not in the zoning ordinance, so they just left it in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You don't have the town, you have town code number after the HRD one, but the town code number is missing after the other one? I don't-
Yeah. So.
So as we're looking that up, are there any other general questions?
Yeah, I just have a quick question on excavation while we're on it. In the staff report, it says it requires the excavation and fill of 340, but on the, so is that's a cumulative, even though some of that fill could be taken from the cut, right? So they don't They don't balance it and then
The
say
code
that's what
reads-
your cut
The code
is.
reads that way, that you
Okay.
have to count them.
Well, it's not all. So even if you used it all on site, you still need the excavation permit. That's what it means, yeah. It's not for haul off.
Okay, I have a
Oh, can we get this section over with? Okay, so the permit to require over 100 cubic yards required findings for approval. Requiring commission approval. The section is 12.20.080B. The application upon receipt shall be referred to the Planning Commission for investigation and action.
The HRD part of this section, it says because of the slope and because of the amount of excavation, are both, it uses the word and. Does it require both of the, because both are true, it requires an HRD permit? Or is it, is HRD triggered just by one or the other, or is it actually an and?
If you read the HRD ordinance, it gives you this list of, a list that kicks you into the HRD. So between 0 and 5% slope, if you're excavating 200 cubic yards, you're subject to the HRD. And I forget what I say the slope was, over 40. So the fourth category is if you have 31% slope or more and you're excavating 50 cubic yards, you're subject to the HRD.
It's an and.
Yeah.
All right, different questions. Ready?
Just looking at the design aspect and the whereas of the conditions, whereas number 2, the proposed development harmonizes with the surrounding residential development. And that was kind of the flag for me when I looked at this and the 2 existing Arrowwood properties and the last one that got approved. The design aspect just seems to not be consistent with the other ones that are already in place. So that was kind of my question. Was there an element in the original court case that dictated that?
Which page are you looking at? Sorry, I was trying to.
Exhibit A,
Page 1.
Resolution 1417, page 1, point number 2.
Harmonizing in Fairfax has kind of been explained to me this way because I've actually been at design review meetings. And so I think harmonize is kind of a word you interpret the way you want to, because in Fairfax you can't find any kind of architecture except in the Marinda Oaks area where the houses look the same. And so, so you're wondering if that was in the settlement agreement language?
Harmonize, I guess we're looking at it more from a standpoint of not style, mimicking style, which can be monotonous, but more in terms of the scale.
Maybe doesn't clash would be.
The scale within the context of the existing massing.
So,
and also taking into consideration the location of this lot, we thought it was a gentle approach.
So we've
Actually, that language comes from your design review criteria, is where that language comes from. It's not in the settlement agreement.
Yeah, I've recently read the settlement agreement, and that language isn't in there, but the background idea is to make each of these houses blend in with their original natural surroundings. And, you know, this one looks a little more like it maybe does. It's hard to kind of tell, but they don't necessarily have to be cookie cutter houses. They need to blend in with the natural surroundings.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because Arrowwood, Snowden Lane was the first part of this development, and it all had the same architecture as the first 2 homes that got built. It's unfortunate because the construction company that was building the homes got too finished and went out of business. And so I don't necessarily agree that the first 2 houses actually meet the intent of the settlement agreement. I almost think the last 2 are
right.
meet the intent
and
better
that was,
than the ones that are built.
That was a discussion we had last time, and that's part of this. So I think what's important is we get to that actually discussion about the designs. And but I think we're clarifying it's not part of the settlement agreement. It really is a design review condition. Okay, any other questions?
Well, I have one question. On the picture that we have of the site, it looks like there's a heck of a lot of trees, and I'm not one who likes removal of trees. So I was just curious where the building will sit in that picture. And then I had another question for staff, if I may, and that is, can we have a condition that no construction will begin until the owner can show they have financing to complete? And you just mentioned the bankruptcy of the first contractor.
Those were two very different questions.
They are two different questions.
You know, when you get a subdivision map approved, it's pretty standard to make sure that the subdivision company, whoever's subdividing and putting in the infrastructure, can follow through. The town of Fairfax was kind of naive about that whole situation because we don't have that many subdivisions, and we agreed to take as I don't know, proof that they could support it. They did this weird agreement where they put one of the lots in the town's name, and it just it was against the advice of their attorney, and it was handled badly. We've never done it for a single family home owner, for a single lot owner.
But I think
and the subdivision ordinance allows you to require those sureties as part of the subdivision ordinance from the subdivider. But I don't know.
But this is this is an individual applicant coming to us. It happens to be that the property is within a subdivision, but it's not a subdivision property. This is an individual applicant, just like last month there was an individual applicant coming to us, which is
So they're
contractors. It was divided by a subdivision, but it wasn't built, and so I think that's a big difference with this, and this is why the designs look different, is because they're totally different.
The only reason I'm mentioning it in this case is that they have to build a pad, they have to excavate, they have to do a heck of a lot of work more. So that was my concern.
I understand the concern, and I just, have you ever heard of, for a single family homeowner? I've never.
This is a pretty upscale neighborhood in terms of the cost of the product, the parcel and the cost of the product. I would be surprised if someone was naive enough to get into this without a full view of the cost involved with excavation in the house. And I also think there's incentive to finish it because you've got a valuable product when you're done. And in fact, the land's more valuable once you grant entitlements. So there might be some wiggle room if someone got in trouble to flip it during construction if necessary. I would sort of steer clear of that Pandora's box. And maybe if I'm wrong in the future, we could revisit it.
Then we're back to the trees. When we talk to the applicant, I have that question.
Okay. Any other questions for staff, or are we ready for the applicant? All right. So if the applicant can come on up, name, address, background, what you're proposing, and we'll have lots of questions.
Yeah, my name is Dale Van Fossen, and I'm the owner of the property, and I'm also going to be the builder. I've been in construction my whole life, so I saved a long time to make this happen, and always wanted to build a house from scratch. Very exciting, and I feel like put a lot of thought into the project. Yes, it doesn't match the other houses, but I didn't want it to match the other houses. It blends into the hill really nicely. I think I'm on the same page as the city. My goal was to make it disappear into the hill. That's what I'm trying to do. And what is nice about it, and you had a question about the trees, there's really no trees are going to have to be removed to do this. There's one tree that is questionable. It's a bay laurel, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to have to be removed. I feel like we integrated it really well into the site. And I'm just looking forward to putting out a really nice product. It has a beautiful view of Mount Tam. I think it's a great site. And I've worked a long time in my life to be able to build a new house, so I'm excited about that.
Thanks. Do we have any questions for the applicant? I just want to clarify, and I did my best to get through these, but at the same time, there's always something to miss. So are you proposing outside lighting throughout, or is your design a lot?
Yeah, there's
more?
there's
There's a lighting
downcast
plan.
cans at every door.
Okay,
So I think there's three.
but not under the eaves all the way around the house?
No.
Okay.
No, only at the doors.
Then I'm confused because I noted there were lights every 4 feet. Is that only
That's
around?
not this house.
That's only around doors?
There's one at the main entrance, there's one at the
did
first
we-
floor door, there's one at the back deck,
Did
like
we
a
leave a
little
condition in?
can. There's like 4 or 5 lights. It's
Oh, good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I just wanted to make sure that wasn't, because that came up on the other issue. But I really appreciate the design and think it's a fabulous design, and I look forward to you building it.
I think my comments on the design as well were, I think the design looks phenomenal. I would have been great if the other designs that we have up on Arrowwood sort of melded in the background. I do think, again, there's not that harmony with the other properties, so that's the only piece that I bring up, but I think the design itself, the standalone, looks great.
I echo the sentiments. This is a really nice design. I would appreciate seeing something more of a gable roof, pitch roof. It doesn't have to look like the other ones, but something that's maybe in between.
We played around with that, and we had like a shed roof and different roof lines, and it just wasn't, we couldn't come up with anything that looked as good as the flat roof, and I was a little concerned that people were not going to like that, but it works, and with the overhangs and the shade it's producing, it just all around works better than any kind of shed roof could, and it keeps it a lot lower and incognito in the hill. To me, it just doesn't stand out as much as trying to stick a roof line on it that doesn't look so good.
All right. So it sounds like we don't have any very detailed, difficult questions. So thank you very much. If we do come up with any other doozies, we'll let you know. At this time, I'd like to open it up to the public. If there's anybody who'd like to speak to this agenda item, please name and address. 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Bob Anderson. I live at 4 Arrowwood, just a few doors away. And I just want to say that I've talked to other neighbors up there, both landowners and the people next door, and I think everybody really appreciates the efforts of Dell to have cleared the land and done as much as he did to get rid of all the broom, more than he needed to. And as far as the design goes, I wasn't really going to comment on tonight, but the question was brought up before about whether design review was a matter that was in the agreement. And I think there's the proper situation is, the proper way to characterize it is there are CCNRs where design can be enforceable, but nobody wants to enforce those. And everybody is really, and I've spoken to all of the people, is really in favor of letting him build what he wants. And I think personally that probably the person who started out most in favor of wanting not a flat roof, but more of a gable roof was me. But I think after seeing the design, that the design is fine, fits in with the not so much the neighborhood as the land there. And it might even be the case, as someone had said, that it would have been better if all of the houses up there had been designed more with the land in mind, but it's too late. It's already a built environment. So and as far as the look is when people go up to the property, it's probably a nicer approach to see the house that's been designed as before you tonight for fitting in with the land. And there's no need that it really be compatible or identical or like a cookie cutter with the other designs, whether the ones that are there are the ones that are going to be approved. I think that this is a very nice, properly sized house. It's a fairly large house, but it's consistent with the other houses that are there. It's not larger, it's not significantly smaller, keeps up the values, and it's very nicely designed. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? All right, so we'll close the public comment, bring it back to the commission. I haven't heard a lot of concerns raised, questions. It sounds like, was there a clause in this resolution that talked about lights? Because I didn't bring it up because in this one, but I think it did come up before, and this one is out there on the corner, so.
Yeah, there was, in the staff report, there's the lighting discussion from about the every 4 feet and working it out. But within the resolution, it's not there, so.
The only concern we'd had on the previous one was large construction trucks during the school drop-off hours. Oh,
I think the good news is that we worked through a lot of the access, construction, school details. We don't have the lighting details that we had last time. Yeah, 3E has the no deliveries between 8 a.m. and 9:30 during Manor School drop-off. And this one does have excavation limitations. No excavation after October, which applies in this case at this site. So.
Well, I just want to say that I thought it was one of the more beautiful designs I've seen, sort of Frank Lloyd Wright-esque, the way it will blend into the background, and that's appreciated.
I'm going to follow up with that and just thank you for taking that hillside into consideration. And I think it doesn't need to blend there because it's a different kind of site also. It's not perched up on that ridgetop, but it's set back into the hillside. And just a little shout out, I want to thank you for hiring a real landscape architect to do your landscape plan, because that makes a big difference to the final product and to how it sits on that site. So that is much appreciated in the expense that you went to that, because I think that's a really important part of this project. Thank you.
So there were a number of changes to the resolution, but is there a motion on this?
I'll make a motion to approve Hill Area Residential Development Permit, Excavation Permit, and Design Review Application Number 14-22 with the amendments. Do I have the one? Resolution 14-7 with the amendments noted by staff.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. So the application passes. There is a 10-day appeal period, so do check in with staff before proceeding. 10 days, $500 fee. But I echo the comments. Appreciate your time. So we have one more item on tonight's agenda, and there's a few folks left here. And we will keep on moving. So 73 Willow, application 14-24.
Okay, the property owner has applied for a variance and a use permit for a residential second unit use permit for an unpermitted unit that is in existence right now. The 567 square foot one bedroom unit is located in the basement and a portion of what used to be a garage of the 1,134 square foot residence. The property owner does live in the main unit on the property, so that's one of the conditions for a second unit, is that either the primary unit or the second unit must be owner occupied. The second condition is that the unit may not be more than 700 square feet in size or 30% of the size of the main unit, whichever is more restrictive. So they are requesting a size exception because the 567 square foot unit is larger than the 340 square foot unit that would be allowed by the code. However, it is smaller than the permitted maximum 700 square feet and only has one bedroom and a combined kitchen living room area. So it meets the intent of what the ordinance was trying to do, which is to keep the units small. In order to apply for a second unit, your site also must be able to accommodate all the required parking. This site does accommodate the number of parking spaces, but they are requesting exceptions to change the configuration a little bit beyond what is allowed by the code. So they're asking to have the spaces for the main house be in tandem in the driveway, which is where they are now, and they're asking to put the second unit parking in the side yard setback, which they use as parking now. So the parking really isn't going to change from the way it is being used now. And the guest space, this is a street lot, and so the guest space is actually located on Willow, and there is a gate, and that's actually where the front door is for the main upper unit. So we're recommending that you approve the project based on the conditions and based on the findings and subject to the conditions contained in the staff report. And we did need to add one condition, which was pointed out by Commissioner Kierline. Typically, we don't allow gravel driveways anymore because the gravel breaks down any of the public improvements in the right-of-way. And so we added a condition that the parking area shall be surfaced with a solid material that preferably is permeable. And we also wanted to add our standard condition, which we left out, which is that the other agencies have the right to waive any of their conditions, but they need to do it in writing to the town. So that would conclude our...
Okay, any questions for staff?
Yeah, this is the first I've heard about this gravel driveway being not allowed. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because my personal feeling is that these gravel driveways actually allow us to maintain the highest amount of permeability on these sites and on a flat site. And it really...
This has actually been a condition since before I started here, because the feeling of the Public Works directors, and the condition comes from Public Works, is that the gravel does get dragged onto the sidewalk and onto the edge of the road and breaks it down over time.
We don't have a Public Works director.
Well, you do have a Public Works manager, and he actually missed this because he should have included it. It's been a standard condition for anyone that has a gravel driveway.
So can we put in a condition that there's a hardened apron adjacent to the public improvement,
if you wanted to say
to allow for the permeability, because it's a big expense too. But I'm just looking for a way, because the gravel driveways really are just, they're so much softer, and they really maintain a character of a neighborhood differently than a hardened driveway. So I'm just
Would you be willing to leave the amount of hardened driveway distance up to at the discretion of the Public Works Department so that they get enough that they feel it's adequate? Yeah, I'm okay with that.
And also, if the Public Works Department chose to waive the requirement, I'm not sure if we can do that with an existing.
If they do that, they're creating a precedent that goes against.
Right. Okay. Forgive me. Okay. Forgive me. Let's just leave it at the discretion of the Public Works manager to remediate the gravel situation vis-a-vis the public right-of-way. And I think we should put this on the list and revisiting the ordinance too.
There's one other project when I remember that they did this, and they left it up actually to the town engineer. I don't remember, it was so long ago, I don't remember the reason, but they did allow the town engineer to come up with a distance that needed to be paved, and then allow, I mean, it might have had something to do with the length of the driveway or something, but.
And there's different types of gravel. DG is different than hard, big, right? The big, thick. So maybe we've evolved since 28 years ago. When did it start?
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, but the permeable driveway and actually DG is much more vogue, and again, it's a softer product than big, hard gravel.
Right. Yeah, it's just interesting. I have two projects right now where we're being forced to build gravel driveways. So it's very weird to me to have this. But oftentimes it's a car length. that apron becomes a car length, so that when you're pulling out and you're waiting for traffic to pass, you're on a hardened surface and then you go. So that might be a length that we look at. This is a pretty short driveway, so I
I
don't know.
think the space is just about a car length, but we'll leave it up to the Public Works Director and.
Yeah.
I
Sounds
think
like
it's
hardened,
okay.
sounds like hardened apron gives flexibility. Okay, any other questions, or are we ready for the applicant? All right, one more question?
I have a question about the requirements for the drawings on, and after the fact, because I'm very confused by these drawings. They're not clear, and they seem very incomplete to me. So
This is often the case when someone's trying to legalize something that's existing and the homeowner's on a limited budget. They try to use information that they have and they can get from different places. They don't want to pay to hire an architect. Fairfax has historically they've shied away from putting that kind of condition on their homeowners. They haven't given staff the authority to say, we always want architectural drawings. So sometimes you do get this kind of a situation. And if they are hard to understand, if you'd let us know ahead of time, we could try to get more drawings out of the applicant before the meeting. It's an existing unit. It doesn't require any construction. It's in the basement. The only thing they're building is they're going to build the covered space in the driveway.
Okay.
Because they took the covered space away by converting the garage to the laundry room and bathroom.
Okay, so how do you enforce compliance, for all the other parts that other people are required? The fire department and, Ross Fire Department and
Well, they have to
everything else.
they have to submit construction drawings to the building department. And the construction drawings have to show that whatever they've done meets the building code requirements. In this case, it's just going to be it's going to be electrical and plumbing work that they've done.
Okay.
Yeah.
It just concerns me that this is setting up a precedent. People might start to build stuff and then just submit it to get it legalized, and it's a real shortcut.
Well, I believe the planning commission can take a vote, right? They can say they only want architectural drawings. But your council has never wanted to put that on homeowners.
And it's actually, I wouldn't go that direction personally, because there's a lot of professionals out there that aren't technically architects, but they're home designers that actually produce nice product also. But again, I think Linda points out that there's sort of a precedence in town to be a little bit relaxing with existing non-conforming situations. And again, I think that if you can get to us ahead of time for any clarifications, you also can go look at things. We feel comfortable that technically for the learned professionals review of this, we've got enough to go on with the existing information. Your point's well taken, and we'll try to do a better job to make sure you get more understandable product. But it's a balancing act.
And you'll remember the last one you did, it was kind of the same. They had this survey, and then he had floor plans that were from a previous construction project, and then he had taken the floor plan.
We really want to get people to compliance. We try to, get them to the finish line, and we have the next phase coming with the retroactive building permits and the inspection. So this would be overall, I think, a positive step to bring this in from the cold, so to speak, and get it compliant. And there's a lot of good things that happen from that. It's on the radar of the fire department that someone's living there. There's coordinated smoke alarms, et cetera. So, but your point's well taken, and we'll try to do a better job to make sure that we work with budget-tight applicants. Excuse me, how can we do that?
Well, no, I just, it's sometimes very difficult, short of saying these are not, they're not acceptable by professional standards, so I cannot accept them. I have to have anyway, it's very difficult when they're on a shoestring.
But I think the main point is, I hear less of a criticism about the design drawing themselves. It's the process. It's the backward process. You go do it, then somebody caught you, so then you go get your permits, and then it's okay, and you don't have to change anything. I think what we heard last time and what you're saying this time is you do the inspections, you make sure things are to code, and if they're not, they have to fix them. That just this authorization that we're giving doesn't take away from that inspection process and review.
If someone was coming in to build a new building, I would really, you would get different drawings, but it's really minimal construction is occurring.
And by the way, we do get much worse that never make it to you in the condition they've come in yet. And we push them to get more, at least complete information.
Mm-hmm.
And going forward, you're really, it's a good point and comment, because as we renew the second unit amnesty ordinance, we'll put our heads together and see if there's some way to sort of help property owners find some tools that might make it easy to tell the story. Because there's a lot of really inexpensive CAD programs out there, and just graph paper goes a long way.
Well, that's kind of my point. I mean, they don't have to be construction documents, but there's 0 and there's 100, and this is pretty low.
Right. Well, again, at this stop, you're not going to get construction documents. You're getting entitlement documents.
And I don't think that's what I'm requesting. It's just the information, and even the new construction or the new items are not defined. The members are not defined, and so, that's my concern.
We can do a test and I can give them to you and see if you can understand them. If you can't understand them, then we'll kick them back.
Okay.
All right.
You might want to give them some.
I'm going to go to the applicant now. We'll have a name, address, and a bit of description about the project, and we may have questions.
Hi, I'm Maria Alice, a proud owner of the 73 Willow Avenue home. I guess according to what you brought up so far, I feel like the staff's report is very detailed. It covers all the bases. I appreciate all their hard work in putting all these details. The question around the gravel driveway, not the entire driveway is gravel. I would say probably 50% is actually asphalt, and then there's a part on the side that's gravel, and then the very entryway into the driveway is gravel. And it's been helpful being gravel driveway for the purpose of absorbing water from the rain, because we do get a lot of water from the hills in Fairfax where we're located. So we're in a low spot, and that area tends to flood, and so it does absorb, and we appreciate that. But I'm willing to just comply with whatever is necessary. The covered space, we will comply if necessary. If it's not necessary, we're happy with the way we have it. And your concern in regards to doing something, I wasn't aware of what I needed to do, and so I'm trying here to correct this. I wanted to clarify one of the items on the report. It's people refer to as my tenants. They're actually my family, my daughter and my future son-in-law, who they met in San Diego while she was going to school. He came back from the war and was in Camp Pendleton. They met and wanted to come back here to stay locally, and I feel that it's really important to support young Fairfax residents to come back and be a part of this community. And so I'm just trying to have a space where they can where we can provide low-income housing for them, which otherwise would be forbidden. The prices around in Marana very hard for a young couple. So that's basically all I'm asking for.
Thank you. Do we have any specific questions? I appreciate you've actually addressed a lot of the discussion we've had and some of the concerns. Any other questions right now? Okay.
I would say that just my perspective, I don't generally appreciate when people want to build something and they just go ahead and do it and don't get a permit first. I think that's been mentioned here. just sort of mentioning a little, a little maybe meaner, perhaps, but that's my feeling about it. But now that you're willing to comply and have inspections and do it properly, that's the way to go. So I thank you for that.
Absolutely, yeah. It was never my intention. As I mentioned, I didn't know no major changes as has been mentioned. So I didn't realize that there was something that I needed to do. But now that I know, I am willing to do what it takes to make it right. I mean, I want it to be safe for my family. My family lives there. Nothing but, safety. That's what I want for them and for myself.
Great. All right. So I'm going to open it up to the public if anybody has any comments. A few folks have stuck around. Nobody else? All right. Thank you very much. We'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. I'll start off because I think we've actually seen a couple of these recently, and it's that same balance. It's better to have the application come in and at least make sure it's done right. And I feel comfortable with staff taking the time and doing the inspections and making sure, and I'm comfortable if staff is comfortable. My pet peeve is not the gravel, it's the covered parking. In this case, it doesn't block views, it doesn't sort of change, but I think there's been a lot of cases where that covered parking detracts from the property and takes away, and again, it's one of those code requirements that's in there, but it creates a visual barrier to the actual house, and so in this case, I don't see necessarily what it adds. I mean, I'll just say that. My take on gravel, and I think I have a very different take, is that it's just as impermeable as asphalt, and you get pools of water and things like that, and it's just laying gravel down on the dirt, it just pools and is solid. But I think the discussion we've had, it actually makes sense that it's really about an apron. If we're talking about protecting the thing, if you did a covered carport, maybe putting gutters on it would at least help move some of the water off the property and not into the dirt or gravel, and so those are things. So I'm comfortable either way, but I do think it's important to voice that some of these covered carports to me don't make a lot of sense. Where does it make sense? Where does it not make sense? And the other thing about this is because it's this kind of narrow access, it's kind of the back, but it's kind of the front. Does it add? And when you look at the picture where the parking is, there's sort of a garage door look to it. So then if you put a covered carport there, then what's that garage? Even though it's not a used garage, it's a feature. It's a feature of the structure, and you sort of lose that. So just a comment. We've also made exceptions for parking in the side yard setback even tonight. Those things do happen. And again, this is another constrained space with tight quarters, and I prefer to see parking on the property rather than on the street. And so this is a way to accommodate it.
Just a few of my comments. We definitely need more affordable housing. We need housing in our town to accommodate all income groups. I do appreciate those who follow the process and come ahead of time to get things and processed according to the procedures that we have set out. That being said, at least we're taking steps now to ensure that this does comply. I know Willow's a tight area in terms of parking, and I'm always sort of against parking in the side yard setback, but at least having the tandem spaces and getting things off the street in a really tight neighborhood are appreciated. My concern always with that size space and exceeding the threshold of a 300 square foot to 500 square foot, again, my concern is always around that sustainability, that we do this in one house, we can sustain it in the neighborhood, 5 or 6 houses. Now we've got a bunch of duplex type units, and we can't handle that. So again, that's just my concern that I know I keep throwing out at meetings, but something we need to address in town code.
Quick question, do you remember with respect to that, what the thinking was behind doing the percentage of size because it does create situations where, I mean, so many of our houses are already so small that when you do a percentage of a small house, you get a really teeny unit.
Right.
As opposed, and I understand the duplex issue, and when you've got a housing stock of relatively, again, this is Marin, small houses, at some point, they become micro, but
30% is just to address exactly what you're worried about, is that the larger it gets, the more it's really a duplex, and you've got similar sized units. It kind of defeats your zoning. If you have single family zone, two units of almost the same size isn't really a single family home and a small affordable unit. So
where the second unit's really meant as a granny flat and not a family to be moving in.
Right. So it was their attempt to try to keep them small.
But the minimum is 350. So so the maximum 700, and I think we had a lot of discussions about those sizes. About, is 700 not enough for a affordable unit? But I think that's, because otherwise you just get duplexes.
And I'll just say, I don't think I've ever gotten an application for that small of a unit. They always come in for larger, because for whatever reason.
And I did want to point out, I think this is, last month we had one, and this month, so we've achieved 2 of the, what the housing element, well, no, what the housing element said we were going to do with converting sort of existing non-permitted second units have come in. Well, we permitted it, right? So whether they do it, I don't, we're doing what we can. All right, so discussion.
Yeah, I think your point's well taken, Roxanne, in the kind of the carrying capacity of these neighborhoods, and so often that comes down to parking and how much real estate we give our cars. And so in this specific instance, being able to park in the side yard setback alleviates that pressure on the neighborhood. And it's going to be a lot harder to make these decisions if that can't be met. So, that's something that we probably will want to keep our eyes open to. But also in looking at, similar to the discussion of the Lutheran church site where it's smaller units, and so there's a lessened parking requirement, it may be interesting to look at once they get to these micro sizes, and I've lived in a 600 square foot apartment, which was, it was fine for me, but it's a small place. Then maybe we want to look at what our parking requirements are in relation to that and tie those together, because we did that with the design, was it design review where we talked about once you add a bedroom, then we're talking about a parking thing. So there's a relationship between the size of the house and the number of people housed there, and the how many cars we house too. So it would be interesting to look at those balances.
And just a reminder that location is everything too. As we revisit the amnesty ordinance for second units, we're going to be making a staff recommendation that the parking and the sprinkler requirements in the non-wildlife urban area corridor, the flat part of town going up the valley, be exempt. We're going to recommend that. And also up to 30% slope going out from that non-WUI wildlife urban interface. This is what we did in the last round with the new second units under the fire code. So stay tuned. And the thought being that it's easier for emergency vehicles to get there. It's also closer to the transit corridor to motivate people to not use their cars, and where possible, lend more real estate towards housing and less towards housing automobiles.
So I want to get to, I think we had good discussion, but I want to get to a resolution for this applicant. Go ahead.
I'd like to, I've been struggling with this application. They're asking for the unit to be 50% of the residents. 30% seems small in this case, 340 square feet, but what's proposed seems too large for me. So I looked at what other neighboring cities require for second units. And San Anselmo has a maximum of 800 square feet, but no residential unit should be smaller than 150 square feet as determined by the California Health and Safety Code. And so I actually looked in the residential building code to find out if there a minimum that they list. I didn't happen to have that with me, but off of memory, it was about 220 square feet for an efficiency unit. So also County of Marin, I believe, says shall not exceed 750 square feet. I don't know if they put a percentage on the house or not. San Rafael allows 40% of the main house, but it has to be at least 500 square feet, even if it exceeds 40%, and no more than 800 square feet. So there seems to be a wide variation, but an idea hit me when the applicant spoke that if this is this really intended for their family, maybe there's a way we can connect the two, and I believe that this square footage would be allowed as part, if it was part of the existing residence. I don't know.
They wouldn't be allowed to have a second kitchen.
Oh.
That's the problem. So it wouldn't really be a separate unit. They'd all have to share the same kitchen. They wouldn't have their own separate private space.
So I don't know. I guess I'm still struggling, but just wanted to share that.
You made a reference, the second reference, was that to the building code in the minimum, 250?
Yes, the residential building code has a minimum for efficiency.
Thank you for that. I have to investigate that because there's micro units going up in San Francisco that are 125 square feet. And San Diego's actually gone micro SROs. And so I have to investigate this. Thank you.
The tiny house movement is upon us.
Exactly, and small is beautiful.
All right. I mean, I think what we wrestle with, and we wrestle with these kinds of questions on applications like this, is that we're not being presented with the choice because it's been done. So it's kind of a backwards. That's part of that problem, and the resolution of not approving it is actually requiring it to be torn out and those kinds of things as well. And I don't think that's where it's an uncomfortable position to be in, trying to make that decision. I think what we, and again, I thought it was discussed with our mixed use or something, and I thought we had 350 to 700 as our range. I mean, I know that there's the percentage, but I thought that we were talking about those numbers, whether they're in our code or not, I don't know, but we certainly were in that range.
I think Linda described it well by saying the intent of the code is meant, while the letter of the code in this case is not strictly followed, but the range of units, and it is not a strict, duplication of the other existing unit, at least.
And the second unit ordinance does specifically give you the authority to grant exceptions to the requirements of the second unit ordinance. So it's right in the second unit ordinance that you have that authority.
It's odd that the second unit ordinance actually starts out announcing that it is going to more allow for expansion of second units, and then there's what seem to me somewhat draconian conditions under 17048-040, with size limits being limited to studio or one-bedroom units not to exceed 700 square feet or 30% of the principal residence, whichever is more restrictive. The size of the principal residence shall be based on gross square footage, et cetera. However, the second unit should not be less than 320 square feet in size. But then there are other owner occupancy, on-site parking, unit types, development standards, and fire code compliance that seem to mitigate against making things easier for second units.
And we once had an amnesty program which actually did sort of waive some of those draconian conditions and made it a bit more reasonable, but it didn't result
And we'll be
in very many.
reintroducing a draft amnesty ordinance soon.
But Commissioner Green has a point, because right in the purpose section, it says the intent of this ordinance is to provide for the retention in the housing stock of existing units that comply with health and safety standards.
So. All right. Well, I think we've had discussion. I think there were two conditions proposed, which I think we have heard, and I'd be interested in other takes on the. I like the condition of a hardened apron. I think that works, and I'd be interested in the covered parking space for this site. If anybody has comments.
Just so you know, I looked at the way we noticed that the parking variance and the parking, we just said parking variances generally. So, I mean, I think that since we didn't specifically state, you could waive that if you wanted to. I think the way the notice read, it alerted them to the fact that parking variances were being requested.
I would be in favor of waiving it, personally.
Right. Yeah, and I agree as well. I think this issue of front and center, the first thing you see has to do with cars as opposed to maybe a nice looking house. And that, I agree, we don't want to be profiling our garages as the centerpiece of if you've got a nice house to look at. So.
But I want to make sure you all understand that part of where this illegal unit is taking away a garage that used to be there.
Any other comments?
I guess I feel uncomfortable removing that, as it sets precedent for other properties that have come before that are complying, that would rather not have covered parking, but it was a requirement and there was no finding in which we could go against that.
Those findings could be under design review side of it too, which is site specific.
Can you clarify for me again, in granting a variance, are you setting a precedent?
You have to be really careful with how you create your findings. There are ways to create the findings so that you aren't creating a precedence.
So that's how I heard Chairman Ketchum's comment in terms of design aspects of this site. Your point's well taken about the precedents and all that, but I think under the design review aspect.
You have to, the findings for variances are set forth. And in the past attorneys have told me I have to take those findings in that variance section. Findings for this property that relate to that variance finding. So it's not a matter of just saying it doesn't fit with the architecture.
So if there was redwood or oak trees that were right there in the front that we couldn't take down, and so we can't enforce putting that in without violating a tree ordinance and something else, you can make that variance in place. But I struggle with this one because I don't.
Well, I was just, to echo what you're saying, maybe if the structure was going to put them over the lot coverage or something, or was going to make them violate some other regulation, that might be a finding, although it's still kind of a stretch because it's supposed to be something in the land, the site itself, that makes it impossible for them to comply with the code. So.
So design is not one of those condition findings, what you're saying, there's
When
no
I look at
finding
the
that deals with
variance
design.
findings, design doesn't really seem to fit into any of them.
I've brought this up on almost every case, and I think there's been a couple cases where we have made that decision. Often it's kind of when it's blocking a view, that's when everybody loves to have that requirement because they want their garage, so then they can block everyone's view. So it's kind of this, it's always the inverse of, on the flats where it doesn't add anything, people don't want it because it blocks the house, and where it does block views and create problems, people depend on it to get their garage that blocks the view. So it's kind of a weird thing, and whether it's tonight or whether it's we put it on the list, I think it's an issue for us to discuss, but you know, yeah. All right, so I hear the temperature, but are there any other issues, or are we ready to move on this item?
I hear your point, and I agree. I think it would be hard, other than just the design issues, to make findings for not having it. So I appreciate that.
I think we, you know, we've explored it. How about that? And I think. Okay. I think we did try to ask all the questions we had, and I don't know. I think the findings issue is what's tripping us up right now more than anything else, which are different from whether it's requested or not. We have to make certain findings. So, all right. Is anyone ready for a? Well, there were additions presented at the beginning by staff related to, there's an additional condition that talks about all the other agency permit requirements that will be added. And then with respect to the parking area, I think what I've heard is that there will be a condition that says that the parking area shall include a hardened apron as
Of a depth
determined
by the Public Works Department.
Of a depth determined by the Public Works Department. And then, you know, the rest, if it's gravel or, you know, it doesn't have to change everything, just whatever that apron is.
And then we added the second condition, which we forgot, which is that the other agencies can waive their requirements in writing to the town if they decide to eliminate them.
So.
I'd like to make a motion to approve application 1424, 73 Willow Ave, with the recommended conditions and the added condition of the hardened apron per Public Works Department review, and the agency permit requirements may be waived in writing by those agencies.
I second the motion.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
No.
So we have, there's 7 of us. So 5. There is a 10-day appeal period. Anybody in the public can bring an appeal to town hall within 10 days, $500 fee. Otherwise, the permit is check in with staff before proceeding. So if you have questions, talk to staff. Thanks. Thank you for being patient. 10 of 10 now. So we've gotten through all these things. We'll take a quick break, and then we have a couple more items to get through. Planning director's report, etc. Thanks. We're ready to bring it back. So the next item on the agenda is the minutes. And the minutes are actually from May 15th on the agenda. I think the minutes we're looking at are actually
Well,
May 29th.
You know what? I realized I'm supposed to have both sets for
Okay.
you, and I don't. So I'll put the 15th minutes on the next agenda.
So perhaps what we could do is maybe
Maybe we should continue.
maybe we should continue this, and then we can get both of them together. And then there were some
Although then the council
last minute
won't
looks at
have-
this one. I think there were some comments on these minutes. If we can, they may not be fully, there's some gaps that we're trying to figure out, so we'll bring
We're
them up.
talking, I think it might actually be better to just continue the minutes, and then they're not approved, and anyone that wants to try to rely on the minutes for what happened at the meeting, they haven't been approved, and they can go watch the meeting.
I was just going to ask, what is the relationship between the minutes and the now fantastic
We
video
need-
recording?
No, well, we need the
No, I know we need to have them, but how might they be used differently than if for some reason there's something on the minutes that are approved and there's a gap, or I mean, it's not verbatim, and somebody uses the synthesized, summarized version as a justification for something, and yet the video clearly fills in a gap that is intentionally omitted.
Then they can challenge it, and they can say the auxiliary information is in the recorded meeting, and say that it goes beyond what was reflected in the minutes.
And some attorneys firmly believe that you should only do action minutes, because it does sometimes create, confusion, because they aren't accurate. They're the person taking the minutes' perception of what happened at the meeting, which isn't always accurate.
So I would say it's good to have both.
Yeah, it's definitely good to have both. The idea is on appeals, you need to present what is called substantial evidence of what happened at a hearing. All of the above can be brought in as, potentially, assuming a judge allows it, as substantial evidence. So if there's something in the minutes someone's relying on, but we know something was said and it's in the recording, we can bring that in a court case.
Right. Also not restricting people to just a mechanical, electronic device.
Okay, so we were just trying to figure out, I guess the question is, it wasn't agendized on the minutes, so can we even consider
Sure,
it?
and I've actually got some amendments we can,
We'll just
So
say it was
we'll
noticed improperly,
we'll-
so it was
we'll
continued to the
We'll continue
regular
it.
meeting in July.
All right.
And then I'll put the 15th minutes on, too.
And
I don't know where
maybe
my head was at.
if anybody has comments on these minutes, we can pass them to you, and you can.
yes,
You can have
thank
it
you. And I have some too that I'll pass on to Joanne.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then we'll be able to finalize it next
I
month.
have one broad comment, in that all of these people who stood up, I wasn't there. I wish I were. I really wish I were. But
Should watch the tape.
I'm going to do that. But all these people who stood up, I mean, it's the beginning of a town meeting. It's sort of the essence of what you want to do. And this is a good example of it right here.
Shall we move on?
Yes. We guess we need a motion to continue it, even though it wasn't the minutes, but let's motion to continue the minutes that were presented.
Take your choice.
All right, make a motion to continue the minutes that were presented because they were not the minutes that were noticed, and there are sufficient conversations that still need to be had, or edits to be made.
And we need to include the proper minutes in the packet that were noticed.
Second.
I second the motion.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? None opposed. Okay, we're ready for your report, Mr. Planning
Okay,
Director.
so tonight the chamber had their mixer, and I was invited to give a 10-minute spiel on an overview on the general plan and then zeroing in on the housing element. I believe Commissioner Hamilton actually recorded the presentation. We also had a presentation from Michael Vivret, our very capable finance director. It went very well and very humorous, I might add, and also makes a very complicated document very user-friendly. Moving on, the council, if you recall or are aware, has directed staff to start preparing for a general plan forum, and the date was actually set at the last council meeting for Saturday, July 12th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We would normally schedule that in the morning, but unfortunately, one of the council persons couldn't make it in the morning, so they decided to move it till 1 o'clock, and it's actually open-ended on when it's going to end. We've already started to work on the agenda for that event. There's going to be a professional facilitator brought in, and stay tuned, but hopefully you can all be there. It'll be a publicly noticed town council and planning commission event, and also GPIC event, so that all the players can be there and participate. There's a banner that's going up across Sir Francis Drake, and there were 2 signs at the Fairfax Festival to announce this. And again, it's to give an overview of what general plans are about, and then zero in on the housing element, and then take comments from the public. And that'll be a real good opportunity for us to sort of burrow into a lot of the issues that have come up. We're going to have quite a elaborate display of boards. It'll be a very visual briefing in the beginning, and I hope we fill this room up, and it will be recorded. It won't be live, but it will be recorded. In addition to that special meeting in July for the Council, Planning Commission, and GPIC, General Plan and Implementation Committee, there'll be 2 other council meetings in July. The regular session on July 2nd, when they will be presumably, it's not done yet, but let's just assume that the clerk certifies the petition. They will be discussing as a separate item the disposition of the petition, if you will, and then also the entertaining the recommendation of the Planning Commission to not repeal Ordinance 778, and in light of the petition's presumed certification, whether to, under the, shall we say, cloud of the petition, repeal, sort of duplicate the repealing process of 778, or put the petition on the ballot. So stay tuned, and as you might recall, to repeal Ordinance 778, which essentially adopts the zoning map that was contained in the general plan adopted in April of 2012, it had some minor amendments to the code, not the full revisions to the language in the planned district development or the commercial, central commercial. Let's see, so to repeal it, it takes 2 sessions, two hearings, 2 public hearings, fully noticed. 2,000 notices will go out for about the 7th time on this. We're getting very good at the noticing, by the way. And so presumably that first hearing would happen on July 2nd. There will be another meeting scheduled for July 16th, which had been previously scheduled as a budget workshop, which may or not be needed for the budget workshop, so they're holding that in reserve. Actually, no, I think they are going to have the meeting on July 16th, and the idea is to keep the agenda very streamlined on July 2nd, and then keep it as streamlined as possible. So you're sort of bifurcating what would be a humongous meeting on July 2nd if you didn't have that special meeting. So again, the first reading would be presumably in July 2nd. They could punt that vote to July 16th. And then the second reading, again, if they go forward with the repeal, which you actually, if you recall, the 6-0 voted to not recommend the repeal, but they have to have a second reading of the repeal of Ordinance 778 at a regularly scheduled town council meeting. So that would presumably happen in August, on August, I believe it's 6 is the first Wednesday of August. And then after the second reading, should that vote happen, the repealing Ordinance 778, which adopt the general plan land use map and certain revisions to the language in the relevant zoning ordinance sections, would go into effect on approximately September 6th. So stay tuned. We're going to have 3 council meetings in July, and it's going to be a busy month, and we'll see what happens. And let's see, lastly, I think there was something else out there, but at this late hour, and feeling very dehydrated from a couple of hot days. I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Anyone have questions? Thank you. Oh, there's a question for you.
Given the forum's noticing, when are the announcements, and do the announcements, the public notice announcements for the forum have to have within it the kind of overview of the agenda and objective of that forum, or what's the noticing requirement for something like that?
You know, I may have misspoke. The two formal hearings, public hearings on July 2nd and July 16th will be noticing all people within some 300 feet of the relevant rezoning actions. That's 10 days before the hearings. With regard to the forum, I'm not sure 100% yet what the noticing. We're doing outreach with the banner, with the signs at the festival, and I don't have a full handle yet on just how that noticing will take place. We're doing our best to get the word out there, and there's a big new addition to the website about the forum also. So we're sort of going beyond just the 300-foot noticing on the relevant things, which are more tied to the repeal and the ordinance. This is a forum. I think there seems to be a network on all sides of the debate here that's well up and running. So I don't think there's any lack of people being aware through sort of social networks out there on what's coming. I've been privy to several of these emails going out to these groups about the importance of being involved with this event.
I guess one of the reasons I was asking about it was because if it's a general plan conversation that affects everybody in town, and I would think that would be inappropriate to notice just people who are individually affected by specific provisions, because there's the housing stuff, everything affects everyone, so.
Correct, I got it, yeah. Again, it's a different beast. It's a more global thing. And I might add that part of the information that we'll be presenting to the public in this room on that Saturday afternoon, July 12th, is how, the general plan is an integrated document. The elements all, relate to each other. It's not, the largest element, obviously, and the most onerous legislative-wise is the housing element, the only one that needs certification. But, the map comes out of the land use section. There's a lot of interconnecting parts to it, as you all that worked so hard on crafting the final document know. So we'll be bringing out that interrelatedness between the elements also, which is important for people to comprehend, as well as how much goes into putting something like that together.
All right. So I think the next item is discussion items, so we might as well just move into that because we can also ask you questions then. So we have on the item the zoning ordinance, our list that we've been maintaining. And
we got gravel driveways.
Gravel driveways / carports, covered parking.
Do we already have tandem parking?
We'll make sure we do.
I'll put that on there, but I thought we were kind of going to revisit the whole parking thing because we were going to
Yeah. Yeah. I think just having that global revisit of parking will bring those all out.
So I think the other, and this was a little bit of the questions around what was not in the minutes. As I recall last time, we actually did discuss really wanting to move quickly on. I think there's the edits to the housing element. That's really not a commission thing. Obviously, we would review it when it came back, but clearly that's been an ongoing discussion. But moving on some of the discussion around the language with respect to some of the zones. We talked about the CHCC, and we talked about the PDD language. And I understand there's lots of things going on around that, but I would just reiterate that we as a planning commission are very interested in looking at those issues and trying to make sure there's language that makes sense, because that is one of the concerns and one of the problems that arose.
And at this point in our preparation of the agenda and program, we do hope to have some visuals for each action, from the planned district development to the public domain to the CH to CC conversion, have graphics, and then below those have sort of a bullet list of the concerns we've heard, and we might get to actually having some recommended language, I'm not sure yet, to address those. And there is still sort of this prompt that you've done in the past and the council's done in the past to start work on the planned district development language revisions. And we actually, the subconsultant and I, or the consultant and I, did actually make some revisions started, although now we're looking at sort of keeping the original language and adding sort of a section B relative to just the targeted 2 sites of the church in Tenolima. And the rest, the residual, any residual lands from the prior PDD planned district development properties or the leftover of the church site would be sort of, you know, relative to the first section, and then just the 2 targeted sites would be what we had agreed to with the Housing and Community Development Department at the state in terms of the base density, 16 unit minimum projects, and 100% housing. So we're going to be moving in that direction of focusing in on what revisions need to be made. Yes.
So I think what Brandon was bringing up with relation to this particular item is that we have, you know, we've been creating a laundry list of a whole lot of to-dos for staff. But I would personally, I mean, I agree with you that I think while we have this laundry list, I would like to see us direct staff to prioritize those items first. So before the, you know, tandem parking or whatever else, that we direct staff to say, you know what, we think that you ought to focus your time on the revising the language for the PDD section of the code, revising whatever language needs to be revised for the CH to CC. That's the first priority over and above all of these laundry lists. I don't know how other people feel, but I think that's like just direction to staff that says, get a move on and start working on that.
So if I hear you correctly, you're saying that parallel to all the other processes going on with regards to 778, and again, remember 778, if it is repealed, it's been mentioned in the staff report that you received on the special meeting, and as well to the town council when it was entertaining and voted to move towards the process of repeal, that staff intends to come back in with the sections, each section by itself, the map revision, with the corresponding language, so there's a comfort level in the public. So
one way or the other, the intention is, if it doesn't get repealed, you need to do it. If it does get repealed, the plan has been to come back in this step by step, which means you're still going to need to do it. So you're going to need to do it.
So it helps me to hear what you would like as a body, if you're all concurring, that those be the highest priorities with our time, our task of spending code revisions for the immediate future.
Yeah, and I think just to put it in the context that I'm thinking about it in, I think we talk about all these items and we'd like to address them, but to me, I think whether it's PDD first or CHCC, kind of putting those together, to me that's ordinance language to implement our housing element and our adopted housing element. And I think those, as you've articulated, those are the two, seem to be the 2 steps to ordinance, bring our ordinances into compliance with our adopted housing element. And that's the context that I think, at least from me, presenting it, asking for that, because I think that is the next step. I know there's other things going on. Those weren't tied to the language of CHCC, and they're not talking about the housing element, and we're mandated to be working on the housing element and making sure that we're implementing it. So
points well taken. I will pass
I know you have other pressures, but I think that's our interests. And
I appreciate that. I see everybody sort of nodding their heads. So I think there's a consensus, and I will pass that up the food chain to my boss, the town manager, Garrett Toy, and take that in consideration. If I could add one little other caveat. At the forum, we intend to show the corrected tables that already had been presented in the form of a errata sheet to the council. We intend to daylight some of the other clarifications that are needed in the text of the housing element. And I might add that the inconsistencies, errors, or omissions that have been pointed out to date were all in the narrative section of the housing element. It wasn't relative to where the rubber meets the road in the goals, policies, and programs. And so we will be showing all the corrections we feel are needed in the narrative section of the housing element, and we will be inviting the public to give us any other suggested corrections in that narrative or other parts. And let me just say for the record again, when we first started getting sort of the heads ups on some miscalculations in the tables, in the narrative section, I thanked the public for bringing those corrections forward. We appreciate people catching things, and one person in particular has caught some very important things that we're grateful for those being caught. And we're hoping that we can continue to make this document that's now living better. And so we welcome that help in making a better document. And lastly, if I may, forgive me, lastly, just to reiterate what the mayor said in his dissenting vote, is that a general plan is a living document. And we can revise it 4 times a year. And with regard to the housing element, we do have a deal with the state, which, you know, there's going to be some ramifications if we don't follow through. We have a new regional housing needs allocation coming up for 2015 through 2022. And if we're going to meet the fast track deadline, we have to have that done by January 31st. And the reason is that because HCD, the State Department of Housing and Community Development, has agreed that if we get in the next round, which our quote is for zoning for 61 additional, the possibility of 61 additional units, that they will review it, and we won't have to go through the whole volume again, you know, looking at the success of the last element and all the appendices and analyses. They'll review it, and it's called the fast track review, and then that gets us to the statutory requirement that we have to have an adopted 5th cycle housing element by May 31st, or the town will continue with a 5-year cycle rather than an 8-year cycle. And again, these are unfounded mandates from the state that are very costly. It's really costly and don't meet that, in my mind, from just efficiency next round. So I've got it in my budget. I'm in contact with the same subconsultant who did such a great job, has a trunk line to the state housing and community development department because she's working on tons of other housing elements. And it is a really special niche, and because as I mentioned tonight in the presentation to the chamber, the housing element, again, is the only element of the 7 required elements that is required to have state certification. And it's the only one where the state legislature has really created all these little add-ons that are like a matrix of hoops. And when you're working on these things, it's like this minefield of gotcha if you don't sort of do this and do that. So it would be really wonderful for the town, in my opinion, if we succeeded in getting the next cycle under our belt. And the majority of those we're going to be recommending or asking the state to allow us to have by bringing, of the 61, we were hoping that a large majority will be second units coming in from the COLE. Because if you remember, we tried to get 27 allotted from last arena, and they wouldn't because we only had a year left in the cycle. Well, now we're going to have maybe 8 years in the cycle. So we're going to argue hard that we should be able to get what we think is 40 or 50 informal units, documented informal units as part of that 61. And then there's some actually very prime sites out there that we'll be bringing up at the appropriate time for the remainder of those units. So again, just to reiterate, if we succeed in going forward, regardless of this hiccup, if you will, to get more public input and comfort, the town will be done until 2022.
Yeah.
That's a nice thought.
And I think what I was wanting to, at least my perspective on my vote last month, was that the proper place for almost everything that I've heard is the housing element and discussion around the housing element, not tied to ordinances. And essentially the housing element is that negotiated agreement with the state. And to go through another process and identify what the concerns are and then work with the state and work through that. That's what the town did. That's what you worked on for years, and that's how we got to an amended housing element that was accepted by the state. That was my perspective. I think I think it's important to follow through with implementing that housing element. If the housing element is changed, then we'd work with that. I mean, that's kind of how we work here. So, anyways.
Well, I totally agree with what the chair has said, and having been part of the Affordable Housing Committee, I know what kind of work you went through to get that, and applaud that. What we need to do, though, at these public forums is, now, the way you just presented that to us, we understand what you just said. We need to do as plain English as we possibly can so that the public is educated, so they know what the rewards punishment system is clearly. Maybe we can do a graphic of some kind, a big bright graphic, so that someone can't stand outside and have someone sign a petition on the fly and fool them. Because we had a lot of testimony from that meeting I wasn't in that I saw that people felt they were misrepresented too. That couldn't happen if they were educated. So that's my push for plain English from an attorney here saying this.
And I hear you loud and clear, and if you notice, I always now say planned district development or highway commercial or central commercial rather than the acronyms that are so prevalent in our profession. And it is not an easy task to make these things digestible always, but we're trying. Our jobs are not getting any easier. The regulatory environment is becoming more complex all the time. And I think that the primary objective of holding the forum is really a good one, is in terms of to educate the public and sort of get it down to the layman level. Because what happens, and tragically so, is people have legitimate concerns, and you maybe just looking at like one part of the problem and not thinking through the comprehension. And then conversely, I think there's sort of an unfortunate, for several reasons, and some legitimate, there's kind of a distrust of experts coming around these days. And so sometimes, for example, having a facilitator, having a very carefully scripted presentation that's not too much planner speak, or from, just that's not offending people by being outside of their league, so to speak, or their expertise, but bringing it down, like in the discussion tonight, I tried to explain that the whole idea of converting highway commercial to central commercial was this epiphany that came around when we realized that the historic center of town, the central commercial, the old urban fabric of the town, a town that was built around a transit line and grew out in what's called traditional neighborhood design patterns, was really wonderful. And as incremental change occur in these bookends of town, the highway commercial, which is really about pro-car, auto-centric planning and pro-sprawl, that we go back to the historic character of the town. In fact, someone wrote recently in the IJ that that's what people come to visit. And then likewise, the historic character is, sort of the traditional merchant living style in Europe originally, and in America, where merchants lived above their stores. They got the sleeping lady where we presented tonight, that old urban texture. And by the way, we succeeded getting the state to agree to 2 floors and not pushing us in the direction of 3. We said, no, that's not the historic context of town. So talking in plain English, like, that we want to go back to the historic character of the town rather than CC to CH to CC, and all these acronyms that people get lost in. So we're trying. It's not always easy.
And another thing is, we're doing it our way. That's another thing that that you have to be on that committee, I think, to understand that we're doing this our way. We're not doing it according to Madera's way or somebody else's
Thank you.
way. We're doing
Thank you.
it our way.
Thank you. And as I tried to point out this evening at the chamber mixer, and we will reiterate at the forum, I believe, is that, you know, we had a quota. It was 172 from existing zone properties and properties we built since the beginning of the requirement in 1999. We were able to reduce that by 48. So it was really 124, and it's basically 62 upstream, 40 at the church for seniors, 22 at Tenalima for workforce, and then 62 downstream, counting 9 at School Street Plaza. That, you know, sort of like 17 on the west side, 22 in the middle of Fair and Selm, and 14 on the east side, and we're there. And this is just zoning for the potential. And by the way, I might add, and I'm doing this for the benefit of the record right now and the audience that might be watching. I don't want to hold everybody up on going home, but you know, housing on the second floor could occur now in the highway commercial, but it requires a conditional use permit. But it could happen now too. In fact, if you remember, Mr. Naeem at the Fairfax market came in, and we had a difference of opinion from staff and him in terms of whether the orientation of that building facing the parking lots and the top of the roof of the market and then the backside on the hill that could be built on looking down on it was appropriate versus the old urban fabric that's facing the street, pedestrian friendly, parking behind, and expanding the historic old urban core of town. So, you know, it'd be wonderful if someone like Mr. Naeem came back in. I mean, he could practically just take those drawings and turn them 90 degrees and eliminate the third floor mezzanine, and I think he'd be there. So, you know, we're hoping that as incremental changes comes over time, and after we get through this bump on building consensus and late after we actually adopted the land use map 2 years ago, that we can move forward. So I tried to do that tonight. I tried to talk just sort of in normal terms that, you know, this was an epiphany, a great thing. We want to save the town. And there's an economy of scale, by the way, from infill development. You need a certain threshold of people living around transit to support transit. Oh, and there's one other part. If I get back up to my report, I just want to tell you.
I just have to interrupt.
Yeah.
It never fails that we can always get a fire going, and you just start.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and I failed to tell you, I'm so happy that I am the appointed representative. If you recall, the Transportation Authority of Marin awarded $180,000 for a study of the Ross Valley Corridor. Started as a trolley application for $100,000, but they took a more comprehensive approach and said, look, we want to look at the multimodal planning of the entire corridor, not just different types of transit. And we want to look at the economy of scales of efficiencies. For example, you know, maybe we can actually build capacity in the roadway for cars by addressing more multimodal planning. What a thought. So I've been appointed to that technical advisory committee. We're working on a request for proposals from transportation officials, and that conference I went to in Berkeley a few months ago, boy, there's some whiz kids out there that it was so nice to get involved with this, with the Ross Valley. And it will affect all of our quality of life. So it's very exciting. Katie Rice is on it. Diane Steinhauser, the executive director of the TAM, is on it. We have the representatives, myself from Fairfax, the Public Works Director from San Anselmo, the Public Works Director from San Rafael, and other folks on that Technical Advisory Committee. The report should be done and in a year from September, and it's a really exciting process. It's really going to be great. And finally, and then I'll cease to continue my fire, you know, we really are at a point in history with global climate change and fighting wars over energy that's creating global climate change, oil, and our addiction to oil. And we now have young kids that want to live in downtowns. They don't want cars. And our housing element's a model of accommodating those kids with small micro units, which actually will be paying their fair share of Measure A, and at the same time affordable by definition by being small. So we're at a really pivotal time in our society, I believe, with rethinking how we're doing things. And I think actually, I'm optimist, but I think we can, you know, radically improve our quality of life. And if you're still in love with your car, you get down Sir Francis Drake faster. But we'll see. Well, that's what we're going to try and do.
All right. It's 10:28. So I know you have a question. I'm just reminding everybody that 10:30 we're going to adjourn. All right, go for it.
So you had mentioned the July 2nd, the July 12th, and the July 16th, and the August 6th meetings. And in talking about these inconsistencies, errors, and omissions in the housing element narrative, when are those scheduled to be put to bed? That's not, it's not a policy level discussion about amending the housing element policies for the next round or to address the substantive policy level concerns that the public might have. These are just copy editing fixes to inconsistencies and errors that seem to be related one way or another to this ordinance issue. And so I'm wondering which of those dates might those items get just once and for all signed off on, put to bed, and dropped off the table because they're done?
Well, I know at this point the intent, or at least, yeah, at this point the intent is to start that review with the public of not only of the existing errata sheet of the errors in the table, but other things that we've found. It's actually just a handful of items.
I get when it's starting. When is it supposed to end?
So let me go on. So we're going to daylight those other things we've found at the forum, and we're going to ask for others to continue to assist us to make the document tighter. And then I think we would then come back after the forum. This has been said by our town manager, Garrett Toy. We'd be coming back to the council with a comprehensive list of what we think needs to be amended. And nothing that I've seen so far would contradict any of our agreement with the State Department of Housing and Community Development that got us certified. So there are no, in my opinion, fatal flaws as far as our deal cut with the HCD, if you will, Department of Housing and Community Development, provided that we were able, after, if the 778 was repealed, provided we were able to continue on coming back in the bifurcated fashion. If we weren't, if for some reason, some legal reason, we couldn't within a year, then we're in a gray zone as far as what the state will do with our certification and whether or not the funds would remain available for the church project, for example.
But fixing inconsistent, basically in unsubstantial, I don't know if you'd even use the word immaterial, inconsistencies, errors, and omissions, things that don't change the intent, they don't change the substance, they don't change the purposes, they don't change the goals, they don't change the policies, they correct, they clarify, they strengthen. That's in the housing element, and that can be done, that's irrespective of whether or not the ordinance stays in place or not?
Correct. And again, from what I've heard, and the town manager's in the lead on this, the intent is after the forum, when we've augmented what we've found with a thorough scrub, with what the public might, hopefully, if they have any other concerns, come forward with, then we will package those, make our best recommendations, and take them back up to the council for some sort of formal action. And to reiterate, and actually, in addition, while the errors in the calculation of the tables in the narrative section of the housing element have been corrected via errata, we're going to take the extra step during that formal amendment process, if you will, of the narrative section of the housing element to include those again, so that if anyone has a disagreement that it was appropriate to call them errata, we'll say, okay, well, we do think they're errata, but we're taking the extra step to just formally express that these are no longer material. And again, I mean, just for the record, the errors that have been identified to date are not where the rubber meets the road in the housing element. None have been in the goals, policies, or programs. They are in the storytelling part. And doubly, and in addition, those policies contained in the goals, policies, and programs, those are what get carried over to the zoning map and the zoning ordinance that codifies those commitments. And again, as I mentioned at the mixer tonight for the chamber, you can see on one page in the housing element the complete strategy on page H71 is that one block that talks about it's a master site, it's the project, the opportunity sites graphic. And then subsequent to that, or after that, excuse me, there are each of the opportunity sites articulated by parcel number and what is envisioned to be allowed there. And finally, I might also add, we haven't gotten any applications yet. There's been a lot of public conversation about not enough parking at 10 Lima. We don't have an application yet. We had some site capacity studies that looked at some options, and the same thing with the senior housing site. And we hope to encourage sort of ride sharing so that we don't complicate the church's operation or the school's operation. And downtown, if you recall, with these efficiency units, we do have license in the circulation element to revisit comprehensively parking issues, which are at certain times a big deal in town. And we would have been doing that with the town center plan development process, which is now on hold. So that's unfortunate in my opinion also, because we would be well on our way this summer sort of looking at really sort of managed parking approach in town. But anyway.
So I think we have gone over our 10:30 limit.
Well, let me just throw in one more comment. I mean, I'm sorry. I am sorry.
Wow.
No, I'm way more tired probably than any of you. It's been one heck of a week. Let me just say that the minutes that we haven't looked at tonight of the meeting that I didn't attend, I mean, looking at this, these are questions raised by people who testified that we need to answer. Can I buy a low-cost housing unit? Who qualifies for these things? These are the practical questions that we need to be ready to answer at the forum.
And our consultant right now is going through the tapes of every meeting and writing down every comment, and that is exactly what we intend to do.
Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you. I'd love to adjourn if someone would make a motion.
Motion.
All right.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you.